From the ethereal realm of devotion to the practicality of daily spiritual practice, across the vast landscape of Vedic wisdom and teachings, this is Vaishnava Voices. Hosted by the dynamic husband and wife duo, Sitapati Das and Dana Devi, they bring to you an intimate exploration of the vibrant world of Vaishnavism. Interweaving ancient scriptures with modern contexts, personal stories with universal lessons, they illuminate the path of love, devotion, and conscious living.
Hare Krishna, and welcome everyone to another episode of Vaishnava Voices. I'm your co-host, Sitapati Das, and beside me, as always, is the wonderful Dana Devi. Today, as with every episode, we're diving deep into the heart of Vaishnava teachings, exploring the wisdom, culture, and practices that guide us towards a life filled with devotion and service.
That's right, Sitapati. We are thrilled to have you on this journey with us. Whether you are a seasoned devotee, a spiritual seeker, or simply curious about Vaishnavism, here in Vaishnava Voices, we are all about fostering connection, understanding, and growth. And remember, we are not just exploring, we are also experiencing. So let's begin.
So sit back, prepare your hearts and minds, and tune into the sounds of the soul on Vaishnava Voices.
Hare Krishna, Bhima Karma Prabhu, Dandavats.
Jai Shri Krishna, nice to see you.
Great to see you too, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question for you. Could you see that introduction and hear the introduction as it was happening?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, very nice. Conch flow.
Yeah. That was actually scripted by an artificial intelligence, ChatGPT-4.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I could hear
I
the
just
voice
punched
was a little bit, mechanical sounding. I could.
Yeah, well, the narration
it's subtle,
voice
but,
was...
It's subtle, but we could.
Yeah, you could tell.
That's-
But yeah, so the actual script itself, the words were written by one artificial intelligence. We got the narrator was just another one. We punched the words into it and it read them out. And then we just, teleprompter read the words from the script from the first one. Yeah.
Well,
a
all
new
things
world
are
we're living
useful tools.
Yes, that was the world premiere of it right there. Put it together this
Fantastic.
afternoon.
Great. Excited.
Yeah. Welcome to all of our viewers. We've got 4 people watching live online right now. If you're watching, drop us a comment. Let us know where you're watching from. Izzy Alvarez says that was a stunning introduction. Thank you. Let us know where you're watching from. Give us a hurry ball, thumbs up, tag a few friends to find out about tonight's episode. It's tonight here in New Zealand. It's like 7 p.m. Saturday, and it's Saturday morning where you are, right? In Europe.
Yeah, that's right. At 8 or 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Nice.
Fantastic. So I don't think you've met my good wife, Dana Devi, before. She hasn't met
No, I
you,
haven't.
Bhima Karma.
Nice to
I
meet
Saragrahi.
know him many times. Yeah, I saw you doing the palmistry of my husband.
Oh, okay.
I saw you. And I don't remember you well, but I think you were traveling around the world doing Midanga classes or Midanga lessons or
That's right.
some sort
Something
of
like
Midanga.
5 years ago, I
Oh.
believe I came to New Zealand.
Yeah, I remember
So you
that.
saw him here.
I think so because, sorry, my memory is just one of those
Yeah, of course.
memories.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you were here in New Zealand 5 years ago, then the timeline matches up, hey?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that we can cover in today's episode. I was kind of like almost at a loss for how to pitch this thing. There's it was Hrishikesh Das, Henry Doktorsky, who, published 40 years ago today, what happened at New Vrindavan. There's that whole angle. There's like who you are today, like where you come from, who you've become, what the future holds. There's like a whole world there. Where to even begin? I guess let me begin by saying a couple of things about you that I know about you, and then I'll give you the opportunity to create yourself as you want people on the episode to know about you. I found out about you from I think Sevaka Vatsala Das was like, I got my palm reading done, and like, you know, it just incredible, changed my life. And I was like, dude, I'm just fully not into that kind of thing, right? You know, I'm like, I'm all about the science, you know? But I was
Right.
like, you know what? If this guy says that it made such an impactful difference for him, then even though I don't necessarily have a theory about how that works, that doesn't mean that it doesn't work. That just means I don't have a theory to understand how such a thing would work, you know? And I
Right.
was like, you know what? I'm gonna do the scientific experiment on the strength of his recommendation. You know, like someone says, you got to go and see this movie. You got to try this restaurant. You know, he was just like, dude, it made such a big difference. I'm like, I'm sold. So, you know, I signed up, and then you did my, you know, I sent you some photos of my hands
Yeah.
and stuff, and then you did a palm reading. And I have to say that I was like, this is incredible. Like, you know, I'm still kind of like, is it that thing where you read the wrong horoscope in the newspaper and you're like, wow, that's so me. And then you realize you read the wrong one and your brain just like maps it. But I was like, no, man, like, this is too, yeah. I mean, you told me some stuff about myself that gave me, and I'm like, even if that is all made up, it's still like really good. But no, I have to say that that's one hypothesis, right? That you make it be true, or you make it make sense to yourself because you want to believe in it. I'm not like that. I'm a skeptic. And I was like,
I do try
there's
to
some
give
stuff that you
sort
told
of
me.
compelling details that wouldn't suit other people. So, you know, if we see a particular trait in anything and take it as definitive, we can give a converse example. You know, so if somebody, for example, is right very giving of their honest opinions and their actual feelings, their inner feelings, that's, you know, compellingly different, you know, from somebody who tends to withhold their, you know, inner feelings, and they don't like to, in fact, some people will in fact feel insulted if they're pressed to share their honest opinions or their feelings, because you should already know. And so these are two like opposite distinct types. So you know, that's sort of one of the things I try to press for, so that, right, it's not something like one glove can just fit everybody in a sense. There's some real distinct opposite features that palmistry actually, I found, very quickly and readily brings to the fore. And I've found like people that I've known for my whole life, right, once I look at that, I was like, oh my God, I would have never guessed this about you.
That's awesome.
And I've seen on Instagram, you do kind of like blind readings of palms. You know, your wife brings a palm for you to read and a picture, and you read it. Yeah, that's interesting too. Then a friend of mine, afterwards, I became the raving advocate. I was like, dude, you got to do this, you know, like this will change your life. And he was like, dude, it sounds like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know. He's a bit of a conspiracy theorist, you know, some of my friends are, I don't know why. But he was like, he probably just Googled you and read all your social media, you know, and then just got it from there. But I was like, no, man, because there was a moment where you did one hand, then you went to the other one. And I was kind of about like, how does like fixed karma from birth, things that change over time, circumstantial. And then you were like, oh no, actually, even though you show up this way in the world now, you've actually had to work really hard to create yourself in that way. It's taken like a lot of work. And so you show up in two different ways, one in public and then another way at home with the people closest to you. And I was like, dude, nobody gets that from my social media. Like, unless you were talking to my wife, there's no way you could have known about that unless there was actually something on here that tells you that.
The Vedic sciences really do give a simple, straightforward way of really just seeing, you know, and understanding the person that's right here before us, whereas, you know, the modern cultural approaches tend to put, you know, as Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur put it, right, an artificial imposition, right? And so it's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata that the residents of Dwaraka, Puri, the Krishna's city, were all quite familiar with the language of the body as they put it. So reading the features of the body, reading the features of the hand, and the language of, body positioning were part of their spoken language, right? Which is really, you can say, simply giving deference to what's right before us, essentially, right? And I think all of us already have, some degree of intuitive sense of basic expressions, right, of face and tone of voice and so on. But also, I think if a lot of us just pay attention more and sort of work with their intuitive understanding, we'll see, like, just the fact that the person appears this way before me says what we call sthai bhava, or the steady underlying stable character of this person, and therefore their body has formed in this way, right? Because they're this type of a character. So yeah.
So there's something we can dive into there. And I actually asked Savika, I said, hey, we're doing an interview with Bhima Karma. Send me your questions. So he sent me some questions that we can dive into a bit later.
Sure.
So then the other thing after that was the Mridanga lessons. So, while we're talking about it, you're like, hey, I do Mridanga lessons too. So I'm like, hey, let me get a Mridanga lesson. And I've been playing Mridanga for 25 years, just playing in kirtans and tons of kirtans, picking up all kinds of stuff. And then we just dialed it right back to the very beginning, Tere Keta. And it's like, oh, okay. Is that what this is meant to be? Like a completely different, like the missing first lesson kind of thing. And and it was like, almost like I had to do 25 years of like playing in kirtans and everything to be able to appreciate what that lesson was, like, and how deep that was, and how that's why I called this episode The Subtle Vedic Sciences, because I was like, okay, there's obviously some, and from those two different things, the palm reading and the Mridanga, I was like, there's some underlying, like, I talked about that missing theoretical framework. Like, I don't have from my Western science education an underpinning framework from this, but as a musician, I can understand, the click track, the divisions of the beat, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But then this was like, okay, this is something else underneath this that's very subtle, and it's also expressed in both the palmistry and the Mridanga playing, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, I think it is aptly an appropriately chosen title. And I'm also a trauma therapist, which I've studied for also a good 20 years now. And of course, primarily, Vaishnava culture really is, the framework within which I've, and continue to frame, my own character. And the subtle science, really, that's what Vaishnava culture is all about. And I would say, like, a common thread or vritti, a steady vibration that remains coherent through all these subjects and all subjects, period, really are sort of the connection of two opposites inside of a whole, to put it really simply. And the language that I use is the typical Vedic language is Adibhautik, Adhyatmik, and Adidaivik. Most ISKCON people will just be familiar with these terms in a very specific framework of the kleshas, or the types of suffering. But that's just
miseries.
Right. But there's, in any Vedic science, you'll see these terms, the threefold ... fill in the blank. So it's really simply an analytical template that lays out that there are three layers to the entity. I use the word entity. Right? Whether we're talking about a person, a place, or a thing, there is one entity of which all entities are an emanation and a part. And so all entities share, right, a common makeup. And so one basic way to start breaking that down is the adibhautic, or the, right, I use three opposites that we use in rhythm, which is that which is plural is the adibhautic, or the feminine, the prakriti, the manifest. That which is singular, right, is the purusha. And that which is manifest or external versus that which is unmanifest or internal. And that which is always changing, external, versus that which is always the same. So you have these opposite, adibhautic and adhyatmic. So there's something that's abstract, right? For example, here I have, right, a kupi, right? So the Sanskrit word kupi, cup, kupi, kupa, well, right? So there's always going to be a vessel or a patra, as Rupa Goswami puts it, a container, right? There's one container, there's one, right, patra, there's one vessel, whatever you want to call it, right? My hand can become one. It's one, and it's always going to be there. It always exists, and it's unchanging, and it's only one, right? But there's many, many cups, and this particular one is literally existing in a state of flux, right? And so on. But now, none of these things exist outside of the context, right, of a personal reality that puts all of these relationships together. So Adidaivik, right, I just sort of term it the person, right? Because the spiritual is really more about that internal adhyatmic aspect of things, the abstract aspect that lets us understand things principally. What is a cup versus the cups that are here, you know? But really, the meaning really comes from the personal aspect of things. So that's basically the breakdown. Now, inside of that, what makes a science subtle? Okay, that's an intellectual framework that lets me analyze something. But really, where the Vedic sciences, to me, come to life are bringing in the direct felt sense in the body. And that's the yogic process, and I term it from Natya Shastra because that's what I study a lot for music. That covers all of dramaturgy, but also it's a primary text, source text for anybody studying rasa vichara. So vichara, you know, consideration from an angle. So consideration from an angle of rasa. So we have bhava being my expression. If I'm preparing food, right? I'm preparing, right, an expression. And rasa, here's the experience, not just the taste, right? The experience that is elicited from me while experiencing that expression. And so there's so you see there's a total direct working with my consciousness. And now the ideas that I've used to arrive at a direct, conferring in this state, have now just become instrumental. So I've just stepped out of the intellectual and into the direct experiential, and that's really where the whole yogic world, the door opens and becomes completely unique in the world from that very first step. And so trauma healing, which is basically a very recent outcropping into Western culture up until about 1995-ish, in that period, it was, and is still by a lot of people today, considered to be a kind of a life sentence, so to speak, that is incurable, that, you know, once a person kind of has PTSD, shell shock, right, so on, trauma, that these symptoms are only marginally controllable or manageable, either through learned behaviors and sort of management, or through psychoactive drugs, which there's actually no physical science showing that these psychoactive drugs actually have any more benefit than placebo, by the way. So, but all of this science that has now come out, and there has been some clinical trials done at this point, have come from the Vedic literature, largely via Buddhism, right? Which basically is, you know, not according to modern understandings that have been kind of promulgated in universities, but very plainly, Buddhism is simply, you know, what we may call a form of, you know, Hinduism, or just another beautiful garden variety of fruit, flower, vegetable coming out of the fertile dharmic bed of Vedic culture. And, you know, the Buddha is documented in stone tablets as having studied at Takshila University. And most of a great deal of the bodies of his works are direct translations in Prakrit of the Upanishads. So a lot of the meditation techniques, right, have been sort of right, like we do. We go to a base and then refine specific understandings or techniques for specific uses. And so these meditative techniques and sort of have that become disciplines in their own right, basically, that came through Buddhism, have now been popularized in different ways by different people for different reasons in the West. But those basic ingredients of the direct felt sense, as some people have coined it now, right? So that cultivating a direct awareness, and within that even, right, a differentiated sensitivity using my sense of my state of consciousness as it is reflected anubhava, right, in my bodily felt sense, right, and then even sattvika bhava, the spontaneous sort of like tears, shuddering, these types of things. So yeah, the subtle sciences really are all about working with our direct state of consciousness as is reflected and felt in my body, as opposed to a philosophical orientation, right, is not seated in direct experience, but is indispensable and extremely important to be able to channel into specific states of consciousness that I want to be in. And so in the spiritual processes, whatever sampradaya it may be, right, that's the primary sort of plug in the wall, that if I'm going to be effectively, right, expressing myself from a particular angle, really no matter what I'm really expressing is the state of consciousness I'm in, whatever. And the best thing is when my words, right, and so on, match up, to my state of consciousness, then whatever it may be is actually an authentic, compelling, personally touching presentation.
I think that will give people a sense of why I was so keen to have you come on to the Vaishnava Voices podcast to share this with people, because it's like sometimes people will listen to it and just go, I don't really understand exactly what he's talking about, but like it's some kind of esoteric thing that, like, if you've studied Srila Prabhupada's books, you've heard many of those terms. Like you crossed a whole bunch of stuff, Buddhism, the Upanishads, philosophical orientation, psychosomatic experience, the Natya Shastram, Shastra, the Nectar of Devotion, Sthayi Bhava, like just the whole, we just went across everything there. And people are like, I've heard all of those terms before, but I've never heard them put together this way. I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about, but like he's painting a picture of something. That's the experience I'm always left with, and I go away and meditate on it some more. And it's an esoteric, subtle science. Yeah. Interesting. You also have gone into this area of trauma. I don't know if you said trauma counseling or trauma therapy.
Trauma therapy.
Yeah, either one. The English terms really don't do justice, but yeah.
Here's,
so trauma is
says it's epic to see you, Bhima Karma Prabhu here. Jai Shri Krishna. Dear Prabhus.
Jai Shri Krishna Rupaji, nice to see you. Or your little tag there anyway. Hari.
Sorry, Prabhu, I cut you off there. You were talking about the trauma therapy.
Yeah, so I'll define the term very quickly. Trauma, at least in an English context, roughly refers to a set of symptoms that arise in the aftermath of an unresolved experience that the person deemed overwhelming for whatever reason. Right, so that's really trauma. So basically, trauma refers to a set of symptoms, right? So if something happens to us, well, everything, first of all, let's say, that's happening to us in our flow of consciousness is, right, eliciting, that's rasa, right, eliciting a particular experience within us to respond. And therefore comes the idea of responsibility, right, that we all have a responsibility to respond to what's actually happening with us, and the nervous system is really the base of that, right? And so when that response that's elicited within me is overwhelming to my system, right? I have literally a certain capacity in my system to hold charge, voluminously, and in terms of type. We all have different types of bodies that have limitations. But then even on top of that, what types of skills have we acquired? For example, to run away from danger, right? And the capacity of a child to run away from danger, especially when it's coming from the person who's there, who is my source of protection, right? So these are, right, many situations can arise where there's a response called up in us. Maybe there was a threat, maybe there was a shock, who knows what it could have been. But the energy that's called up in me to respond there itself is overwhelming in some way. So then the system, right, we have the famous fight or flight most people have, right, come across, right? But there's the third response, right, which is the freeze response, where these two, when, right, we can't resolve this charge in one way or another, are put against each other, and they form a firm lock against each other, which externally we can appear to be normal or well composed or even relaxed, right? But there's, right, in some form inside of our systems, right, there's a firm lock that's at a high vibration and searching for resolution. And so trauma is a term that really speaks to that state. And so resolving that really has to do not with, things that people may have heard of, like psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatry, and so on, which really deal a lot more with, the upper aspects of our consciousness, language, my name is, and, my ideas are, and, more to do with navigating my state in my nervous system, and really working with taking a piece of an experience at a time, just like we would anything else, and allowing our nervous system to work its way through that and sort of resolve that piece. Right? Oh, well, this is kind of intense. Okay, my breath, start. Oh yeah, oh that was, yeah, right. And then as we can acclimatize to it, okay, but it's enough. I can sort of handle this much, whatever it may have been, fear, surprise, elation, even, who knows. And then we'll come out with even a fortified sense of being able to deal with that kind of experience, with that amount of experience in general in our life, and so on. So that's what that's about. And you can see that's a nice foundational piece, right, for everybody who's really, right, as a person, right, looking to, right, be more available to ourselves and to each other, right, on this level of just basic, like, can I, be with the flow of consciousness here, as opposed to have pieces of me locked up. And so it's really an integral part of any spiritual practice that we've just kind of, in the modern, this modernity culture world, sort of been estranged from.
So this really brings me to the third kind of, so there was the palmistry, the mridanga that I knew about you, and then this third thing that I didn't discover until much later, and that's about kind of your history and, how you joined the movement, if you could say, how you ended up here. And I think it's also good to touch on at this point, because it's not that your circumstances in life define who you are, but it's your response to them that really defines who you are. And that's something that's like abundantly clear in who you have created yourself as your character in this life. And that was that, I've read Monkey on a Stick. My first wife moved into New Vrindavan in 1986 and was like there through that whole kind of Leela.
Okay.
And,
1996, huh?
No, 86.
Oh, 86.
1986.
Okay. All right. That was, more momentous.
And then, and then we were reading, I found out that Tirtha Das had written a book, 100 Monkeys. So we were
Mhm.
reading that.
Mhm.
And then I found out that you are Chakradhari's son.
Mhm. That's right.
And today, or it would have been yesterday now, Henry Dr. Ski posted a thing 40 years ago today. Tirtha burns down Chakradhari's house at New Vrindavan. You know, it's kind of like New Vrindavan has become the, I don't know, the Nightmare on Elm Street story of ISKCON in so many ways.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that you're like right there at the center of it, like
Yeah.
right in it, and as a child.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know how much that you want to talk about that or share about that.
Well, yeah, I think that, as I was just earlier reflecting on our responsibility, right? We don't, at least I don't have the experience of consciously, in English choosing which experiences come my way. I don't know about you guys, but they certainly do come, and so I think that we all have a role in our family, community, and society. And depending on the experiences that come, we're all going to be in a unique vantage point to make our unique contribution. So here I am, and with my type, right, of nature, and so on. And I was seated in the middle of these experiences of, the very dramatic kind of, murder and abuses and so on, that happened with my family, like pretty much all the men of my family. My younger brother also, right, died in a refrigerator just 3 months before my father. Then my father, and then later on, my elder brother, uh, in effect, suicided in terms of alcohol poisoning. Later on in 2000, when one of his Gurukul teachers contacted him. So a lot of death directly in my family. And of course, those of you out there who are aware or have heard of some of the rumored happenings of the Gurukula system, right? The physical abuses, the strange mental, teachings and treatments, right? The sexual abuse, right? All of that. I've experienced all of that, along with my peers growing up there. So I've really gotten a good, full powered dose of kind of everything ISKCON sort of had to offer with regard to these things. And I think really what a big part of what additionally makes my angle here unique is that I later, as a young adult, made the choice to, I forgot about actually many of these things. It was sort of frozen, sealed off in my memory chambers, for safety purposes, I suppose, right? But when the memories basically started resurfacing, I made a choice that I wanted to separate the baby from the bathwater, and really I wanted to make an educated choice about not just ISKCON, but what was essentially this Krishna culture. The teachings, not that Srila Prabhupada even necessarily was himself giving, but where's the flow, right, that's feeding this thing, and essentially what's here. And so that began like a, sort of a lifelong, sort of journey for me into, right, trying to, right, get to essential Krishna consciousness, Vedic culture, and really what is this and what is the idea behind it all, before I just throw it out because of some negative taste that I got growing up. And so taking a lot of time to go to many different teachers, and I lived in India for more than a decade solidly, and I always go there nowadays. I sort of come with a lot of this sort of outside of ISKCON background into not just study, but a lot of now lifelong personal relationships, with people of different Vaishnava and different Vedic perspectives. And so with that on one side, and then with this sort of, you can say, toxic, poisonous sort of angle of what happened in ISKCON and is going on in ISKCON. I think that's my, at least kind of gives some idea of my unique angle on all this. And so what you can say how I've been positioned, to make a specific offering here.
Crazy. Couple of things about that. It just reminds me of the 7 sons of Bhishma was the last one. They were all thrown into the
that's right.
Ganges.
Yeah.
They were the sons of
Ganga.
Satyavati?
No, Ganga Devi and Santanu was Bhishma's father. So King Santanu met Ganga Devi, and she kind of said, yes, we can be together, but you can never disagree with anything I say.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a.
The child was born, and she's like,
a lot of women might like to get their husband to agree to that. And the first time you will, question something I do, that'll be it. That'll be the end of our relationship.
And so he stopped her from killing Bhishma.
Yeah. After 7,
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the backstory from the previous life, which we don't get to see, right? But like when I see a circumstance like the one you described with your father, your younger brother, your elder brother, I'm just like, dude, this is like, there's some, and then there's like, yourself left standing at the end of it. And it's like the Bhishma Dev character, who remains on the planet, to perform this particular task. There's that aspect of it, looking at it. I mean, nobody wants to give away their identity, while they're undercover on the earth. But then the other thing about that is there are people who are like, I'm leaving and I'm out because I'm so upset and disillusioned about what I've heard has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like people, and then you're in the meantime experiencing it to levels beyond, like it's like everything that it's like almost like literally everything that you have heard of that has happened is like manifested in your life. And even still, your response to it is completely not like, okay, I'm out of here. If there is anyone who had like, the justifiable reasoning, where you'd be like, I can totally understand that, that would be your character. And yet your response to that is completely not that.
Yeah. I like that Bhagavad Gita shloka in the first chapter, right? But happy are those to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets, And, for all of us, our challenges that come our way unsought are really those I see. And so, yes, I was very challenged, and it took, many years, and there's still, work that I'm doing all the time. However, being able to be here and with a predominant amount of like stability and gravity and maturity and speak about these things, I think is like a really important role that I play here for our community. And when I say our community, kind of what I refer to as a larger community of spiritually seeking and evolving people, and this sort of answer to the rise of a materialistic modernity that's sort of foisted on a lot of us, right? Just in our educational system, and to me, even in the very way that our language, our spoken language is structured, and the implied meanings, right, that are just worked into the way that we commonly communicate with each other in modern culture. And so, I think that, New Vrindavan, ISKCON, right, is just now part of a larger forming, you can say counterculture, but really just a re-emerging of real culture.
Exactly what we need.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, that's what we need, because there is experience that you can share to the world, or some devotees that went through there's many experiences similar to yours, and different to yours. And so many people are, you know, in myself, seeing all of that. You know, your father has been murdered by people that many people have, you know, adoring these so-called swamis. And behind the curtains, these people are behaving in such a demonic way. And then on top of that, children so innocent and vulnerable, they're being treated like that. And the whole trauma caused by that is in your system. And then there is so much strong energy there for you to refuse all of these religious culture or belief or whatever, because from the innocence that you see, you know, God is there, going to protect us, and people are talking, you know, you the son of God, you child of God, and praise the Lord. But you turn around, there's a different story. And confronting that is brutal. It's confusing for a child at a young age. What am I doing here? You know, in one hand they say this, and the other hand I'm experiencing that. What is this about? And to the point they say, hey, I don't want to do this. I don't want to see these people. I don't want to hear about these people. I just don't want even hear the name of Krishna. And that's because it's the pain that exists within themselves, you know, so much trauma and pain that nobody can attend to that to those children, what to speak of these religious groups. And you yourself coming out of it, you know, coming out of the ashes, going through the fire, and here you are, a young gentleman, you know, trying your best, and you went through all of this, you know, trauma healing, and still loving Krishna despite your past, despite the pains that you experienced, the death of your younger brother, the death of your older brother, and your own father, and everybody knows about your family, what happened. There's nowhere safe to look, and you here standing up strong. What is the thing that got you there that says you made a distinction, the clear distinction here, and the power to go ahead and stick with Krishna? What happened then?
Yeah, I years ago, you know, when I had a bit of a crossover experience, you can call it, in terms of a deep self-awareness, kind of, you can say. And when I say self-awareness, what I mean was there was a point at which my vantage point of experiencing myself became a step back from my name is Bhima Karma, and this is my life story, and, you know, so on and so on. And I was actually beholden to, oh, I possess this, you know, identity, you know, that I've sort of made and fashioned in whatever way in order to be able to interface in this culture and so on. But, oh, this is me, right? And there was a crossover point then, and then I was like, wow, this is so freeing. And so, you know, wonderful, and like, you know, it's beyond like happiness or distress, or like, it's just like I've read in all these literatures all my, wow, this is great. I was like, what is it that brought me here, and how can everybody do this? You know, so but I couldn't really put like a single, you know, oh, it was this thing or is that thing that we could just replicate this and, you know, send out like, you know, pills or, you know, a shloka everyone should recite every day or something like that, you know. So it's really it's hard to say, and I think, you know, one English term is grace, right? We have so many Sanskrit words, you know, like pushti, like kripa, right? Like danya, so like mercy, kripa, right? Pushti, like nourishing, grace. So who knows exactly, you know, what the turnkey formula is. I think really what it is deep personal relationships that we can successfully form with people who are able to set aside everything else and really serve, right? Serve us, you can say, by just beholding us without, you know, philosophical or other, you know, conceptual sort of angles, and be present with each other, being present with each other personally, right? In this state of, here I am a person, and here you are a person. And let's sort of redefine, right, our experience here by direct experience. And let the information and knowledge just help us in this endeavor, as opposed to the other way around. And there was key people that I, as unfortunate as I was to experience a lot of these difficult, challenging things, that I was also just so fortunate in meeting really amazing teachers in a few different times and a few different disciplines, right? Exceptional, amazing teachers who truly connected and really cared about me as a person and were quite dedicated to their particular service, whether it was a healer, Mridanga teacher, a Sanskrit scholar, a therapist, whatever it may have been. And so I think personal relationships, with people who are actually here with us as genuine people, and not sort of with an imposing sort of mask of belief or philosophy and so on, are the real basic salve or medicine in life that I've come across. Now, I wanted to speak something just about my father and the role, because I think there's like a nice sort of principle example that comes out here, in that bhakti is as opposed to a philosophical process, right? A jnana, knowledge, or a process of let me understand, or as a karma process, as a process of let me become skilled. And I have this some particular ability, and I'm going to become very expert at it, right? To the point of making it an art and attaining some moksha or freedom within that. Bhakti, right, is a very personal process, and right, every person comes with a magic ingredient of individuality and uniqueness, right? It's Atmahood. It's what it makes that self unique and bounded and different and definable from others. And so bhakti is therefore necessarily going to have a unique form and shape for each of us, which means there's going to be work needed to be done by us each, not to conform to, right, an artificial imposition again of everybody do this and you're going to get this, I'm going to give you this turnkey formula that if everybody just does this, you're going to all get this magic zap, as Srila Prabhupada would call it, right? But instead, there is some principles, right? So adhyatmic, the singular, unchanging, unseen aspect that has multifarious form. It doesn't have a concrete, specific form, but it has a principle form that each of us have to, right, form for ourselves. And so my father, for example, in this community, where there was a lot of conforming to a, Bhaktipad, Kirtanananda Swami, who, right, was the economic figurehead, who was the, right, philosophical figurehead, the, spiritual figurehead. And I say spiritual in the sense of, right, being seen as the symbol of the spirit or the mood and the symbolic holder of that. So here's how I recognize the ideal, like Arjuna asked Krishna, oh, this, liberated person you're talking about, the Stita Prajna verses, how does he sit? How does he talk? How does he? And so Kirtanananda held all these really important roles. And then also, the power of being able to sort of order people to physically do this and that, and throw people out and accept people in, pay money to this person, right? So we have a lot of things, right? Key things that in, you can say, a naturalistic society, in a varnashram society, right, is how we term it in Sanskrit, which is really a society which simply recognizes that while we are one group and therefore we can form a group because there's something in common here, our personality, our humanity, there are very distinct types of people in the group here. We all have a unique set of values, therefore, not everybody's going to, right, even perceive value, and they're going to have different needs, and they're going to make different contributions. And so why should another person who has a different set of values, a different way of approaching the singular, absolute, divine person, and will have their own unique relationship, why should they, right, have control over someone from a different group, because they won't even understand that group's needs as much? So here's a situation where, right, where in traditional cultures, you'll always have, right, these different guilds, groups, varnas, right? And here you got, the king in Vedic culture was not, just telling different, he played a particular role, right? And here there's one person sort of taking all these roles at once, but not being in all those roles at once. Right, and so my father, so there was the New Vrindavan land, which was quite large at its heyday, 5,000 acres, very good sized chunk of land there. Some townships aren't even that big. Own plumbing, right? Its own, set of electrical transformer. Eventually had its own security force, right? So many things. And everybody sort of bowed down to the singular authority, right? There's even a phone system installed, and a lot of, so there's a lot of, group sort of things. Everybody bowed down to the one guru and so on. Everybody there was back in those days, for all of those of us who, were there, know it was a dramatically different mood that was pervasive in ISKCON in those days of, you're more black and white. You're either shaved up, living in the temple, coming to all the daily functions with everybody, visibly chanting your rounds, and so on and so on. And then you're a devotee, or you're not. And if you weren't kind of part of a visible part of these group functions and behaving like the group did, and dressing like the group did, and eating like the group did, you're blooped. Like the bloop goes into the water, you're fallen back into the material pool, and sort of categorized as a karmi again, right? The term for fruit of worker, right, in Sanskrit, but kind of that's the them, and the sort of pejorative them. And so my father, though, was they termed them as fringies, right? They live on the fringe, right? It's not quite out there, it's not quite in here. So we're already sort of seeing, some of the difference here between, okay, there's almost everybody who's sort of following this group and part of this group mentality, and then there's my father, who's already part of this fringe group. Now, the fringies, as they termed them, most of them lived in a separate area of town that Bhaktipad lovingly called Talavan. So in the famous story of Sri Krishna's Leela, right, Talavan was a place where there was the tala fruit, which attracted everybody by its sweet aroma, when it was getting ripe. But everybody knew you couldn't go there because it was the place where those scary asses lived. So there was sort of a joke there, about those are the asses, and so we don't go over there, kind of thing. And so and they're sort of eating the fruit and all this kind of stuff. So anyways, but my father was the first to buy his own land adjacent to the property, and put together his own independent business. So his business idea was that he put together a very large drip system greenhouse. So a drip system greenhouse isn't easy to put together, right? It's quite an elaborate water system, and a certain way that the greenhouse has to be arranged. And so he was basically going to house exotic plants, many of them quite large size, but exotic plants, and different seasons, he'll rent them out to, banks, government buildings, and the like, and be able to basically circulate these through the year. And so, yeah, essentially exotic, green housing and so on. So, right, that makes him economic. So, first of all, a landowner. I'm not just living on the temple land, the Bhaktipad, land. That's already a step. And not only that, but the land, right, is adjacent to, purchased in the New Vrindavan territory. And then second of all, I'm now economically independent. So I don't depend on the temple for my food, my shelter, my water, right? But right, not just my father, but this group of devotees who lived as fringies there were all quite industrious contributors to the, at that time, burgeoning developing community. A lot of them were heavy machinery operators who are very key parts of the development. The building, the terracing, the construction, right? The constant maintenance of plumbing and mechanics, all kinds of things like this, really key, important roles. And so if on one side we have this more, you can say, communistic, right, where all the different divisions of society are sort of bound into a single power without differentiation, sort of a communism in a sense idea, versus on the other, here you have individuals, unique individuals who are, making key, important, industrious, contributions, but therefore represent a more individualistic, personal culture. And then on top of that, we have the further detail that this charismatic singular leader, right, of all the different parts of society is a renunciate, right, for one thing. So the symbol of, spiritual maturity is renunciation of what is termed as material. And the way that term material, right, it was and still to this day is, quite commonly defined as physical, right? So the Sanskrit terms, they're tricky. They sort of escape English translation because, like I said, the whole way we even employ language has a lot of implied belief inside of that. So, what is matter, right? And how these words are even employed, right? And as these devotees came in, it's like, the renunciation of the material, right? So this guy was, he was homosexual, so he had his own sort of opinions about, family life. And then we have the renunciation from sex kind of idea. And there were openly, right, preached and spoken attitudes that, sexuality, even within marriage, right, was something that was to be given up, and something that was a symptom of a materially diseased sort of condition, or this person is still overly materially attached. And as we become more spiritually mature, right, these material things, of which sex is a primary symbol, will be given up. So these people who are like in family life and so on are less advanced, as the term is, and the people who are more advanced will be, right, more distance from, family life, sex life, and so on. So a leader, a spiritual leader, would be, right, sexually renounced. So here these guys are, additionally, they're family people. So we have the owning separate land, being financially and economically independent, and now also, right, they're not like living and basically therefore preaching this idea that, in order to be a spiritual person, you need to be renounced. So we have like a real diametrically, sort of dramatically opposed setup here, where this, structure of the single guru is, right, in effect being, heavily challenged, And so my father was also an outspoken person who publicly, at some key points, publicly challenged the guru in terms of, hey, you're supposed to be the Krishna man, and the moral compass, the spiritual, the holder of spiritual ideals, and yet you're having us, meaning my father as well, and a whole group of these fringies and so on, right? Basically using trade and illegal drugs and different kind of things like this in order to make money. And there's all sorts of nefarious activities that you and others are engaged in. And frankly, I don't find that very savory, and this seems off to me. And this is not a private conversation. This is like in what they would call darshans, where groups of disciples and devotees would be meeting in more private settings with the guru. And it was generally a time where there was a mood of great adoration. The guru will be sitting in a comfortable seat, everyone else on the floor, and there's a mood of sort of looking up to the guru, adoration, and so on. And then someone coming in the middle of that and publicly, hey, I'm a person, you're a person, and I got an issue, and I'm speaking it out straight in your face. And back then, I don't know, people who weren't there back then may just not understand how intense that was to do that. Just the fact that could happen, that was a pretty big deal, because then that exists, and anyone else can do that. Then there was, during the Palace of Gold construction, Mexican workers who were, cheap labor, right? And even with all the devotees that were being sort of herded or funneled into Vrindavan, as much as could be done, to help with the construction and development there. So my father was like, look, this guy was a homosexual before with, Hayagriva, and now he's up to his old tricks again with these Mexican workers. And so I don't know the details of how he came across this information, or whether he knew directly or was heard and it was sort of getting passed around or what. But the thing is, my father was a person who was, first of all, physically large. He was into martial arts, and he was like a bit of a warrior, justice, kind of a protector sort of a person, among other roles. And so he didn't really have any fear, in the foreground of his personality. And so he felt quite free to just, speak his opinions. And especially, these kind of opinions were important to him. And so, openly spoke about that as well. So, right, just it's important, right, to see sort of the norm there was this more communistic culture where it was very important for that leader, Bhaktipad, who had to sort of maintain this, right, persona, right, which he didn't have literally, but he had to maintain that persona of like, I'm the leader of all the groups of people in the society, and then have this, just the very existence, even if my father wasn't, saying, down with Kirtanananda, and, we should, bring something else in, but just the fact of what he was, who he was, and that he was, right, bringing these things to light and questioning things openly like this, made him and anyone else who did these types of things into like literally the number one threat, you can say, to that power structure and to that whole way of approaching and defining Krishna consciousness or spiritual life. That there's one way for everybody. There's going to be, and they should be a sexually renounced person. It should be a guy, and it should, everybody should bow down to them. And there's a lot of sort of implications in there that may not even be directly spoken. So then, when two other devotees in the community had their more, minor issues with him, then their issues were basically used, right? This is right, kind of a convenient circumstance in a sense, to basically deal with getting rid of him as a threat in those senses. So these other two devotees had their separate conflicts. One of them to do with the land that my father purchased. Tirtha was living on that land. Kirtanananda basically let him stay there for a while, and he was just kind of, you can say, squatting, as we term it. But my father purchased it, and so okay, time to go, kind of thing. And it's like, no, Kirtanananda, can you let me stay here? Well, yeah, I bought the land, so he didn't want to go. But then in the course of things, at that same time, so my father was with a nurse there, and she was examining Tirtha's kids, and they turned up with very clear signs of heavy physical abuse, like bruising all over the body, indications of heavy physical abuse. And if someone else were to discover this and know that she had examined these kids, that's like a threat to someone's career for life. Their license to practice medicine can for life can be lost, so what to speak of the morality behind it. There's a real lifelong loss of a career was at stake. And so that was an additionally difficult position that she was in, and then therefore my father next to her was in as well. So that was one set of conflict. And then this other devotee, Daruka, and this is a really, who knows how these karmic sort of threads come into our life, but yeah, interesting intertwining here. So our families were close. Our families meaning, my father, myself, and my younger brother and elder brother and sister and so on. We're very close with their family. We would play together. So literally my best friend that I have memories of when during that time was his elder son Bhima, and his younger son Rohini was my younger brother's main playmate. Who's my younger brother's name is Radheya. And so our families would play quite a lot, and we were close. And I remember I have many vivid memories of going over to Daruka's house with his, wife Vrishni, who was like a bit of a stepmom in my life, and we'd play with their kids and have a good time. So after Daruka had his younger son, though, Rohini, I think he was like just a couple of years old, a year or two old. There's a common thing that would happen with some devotees. We used to call it burnout. Right? Well, you just really got burned out. So Daruka, who was a bookkeeper, he worked in the bookkeeping part of things. He got burned out and he took off. He blooped, as we termed it, right? He fell down again, bloop into the material pool, and he was a karmi again. He went away for a long time, almost a year. And during that time, my dad, who also, by the way, was a philanderer. He had relationships with many women, and basically everybody unanimously reports to me, like everywhere he went, women were kind of on to him and presenting themselves to him, and he was very popular with women, and clearly he lacked normal boundaries with these kind of relationships, and so seriously got into big trouble here. But anyways, I remember, actually I have direct memories of them being together, Vrishni, Daruka's wife, and my father. Like I remember one night my dad had a Bronco, like a brown Bronco. It was parked on top of there was like a hillside there, down from which Daruka's house was situated. And so we parked up there, and it was like going to bed for the night up there. And I woke up in the night with, Vrishni getting thrown on the hood of the truck by my dad, and ha ha ha, and so and that's my memory. That's all. Like later on, we heard, we've all may have read the books, and so and so Daruka came back later on and started crying rape, I was like, what? That didn't seem like rape to me, And many people joke that maybe it was the other way around. Either way, there was loose character there in these areas, and so Druka had this conflict with my father and really got, really upset and deeply aggravated and angry and enraged about it, understandably, and basically started forming phrases like I want to kill him, and he should die, and things like him. And so Tirtha and him somehow became buddies. Well, I mean, they already had affiliation as part of the fringy group, but basically, Tirtha says, he claims that he thought that he would take Daruka over to Bhaktipad and Bhaktipad would talk him down, right? That's how he says it. Either way, at the end of the day, what the common testimony is that Bhaktipad basically opportunistically employed these two conflicts to solve his conflict with my father, in the form of saying, yeah, murder him and make sure that it's not found out and so on, and he's a real problem, this and that. That's how Tirtha, right, gives his testimony, that's how things were worked out. So, but I think, an important, for me, what I'm seeing, from this vantage point as a really important part of this story is kind of seeing these two opposites, right, that we can all recognize in our communities and in the world at large today. That an individualistic, personal approach towards culture, towards our spiritual identity, right, developing to maturity, and then a more communistic, and I'm defining that communistic approach here as, like I said, as opposed to a varnashram system where we have really unique groups, right, being recognized and having autonomous, independent organizations within themselves that make their contributions to a society, right, but that never had some kind of absolutist, governmental control. But each group, and this is, clearly spoken about in many texts in deep detail in Mahabharata, Ramayana, this is a consistent way of handling society, in the Sanskrit documents. But here, right, and we're seeing it now kind of developing more and more in our modern society. So I think this is a great sort of thread here, an angle. And I've directly experienced, the transgenerational, breakdown that's happened in the, acting out of this and in the aftermath of it still today. And so the people's still, there's this, chasm continually forming between people who have a need, right, a very natural need, and we recognize this in a Vedic perspective as a water type of a characteristic. So the element of water, right, is one of the 4 types, right, and water people need a place in the group. And their value system is not so much about what is the group doing. Their place is more about they want that group to work together in a symbiotic way, a nourishing way. Whereas a different, right, part of society will be like, where is that going? What's the morality of that? Would even, in philosophy, that would be even a different group, right? So on. So there's a group sort of, thing, and then there's an individual sort of thing. So there's a man and a woman thing. There's a, right, a lot of, so I'll pause there. That was a big piece there, whole little tale.
It is, and it's good that you are speaking out about this. It's important. I know by now many people know about many dirty laundry exposed for these so-called gurus, and they're so much attached to the fame and acclamation and so on. So One thing that I wanted to ask you is, and also that goes to, what exactly is happening right now in the society in general, also in Krishna consciousness. So you mentioned about this lady called Vrishni that was dealing with your father or mingling with your father. And was that happening while the husband just bloop for 1 year and she was left alone with children, unprotected, uncare? Is that
Yes,
right?
just during that period, not while he was there ever.
Yeah, that's the thing, because this is a lesson, I guess, for all the grihastas or all the young people, guys and ladies that want to get into a relationship. I guess this is for guys to be very serious of protecting their wives. And they have the role to protect and care for their wives. You can bloop for sure. Everybody can bloop. Still get attached to your wife, because at the end of the day, you can work it out, especially in this Krishna conscious world, that we have these scriptures that teaches us how to do things and why to do all of these things. Otherwise, we just have the degradation of society. And what to speak of the males that are also improper with the situation, and they just get up, easily attracted by Maya, and then they also bloop. So, and for females, the recommendation or suggestion for a recommendation would say for females, whatever situation you are in, your husband may be blooping out there, rolling around in pain or whatever. I don't mean pain, physical pain, but emotional pain and whatever is happening. Make sure that you actually know what are your boundaries, and get yourself with your husbands, whatever they are in. Or if you're not intending to get closer to your husband, at least get protected by grihastras that you trust. Otherwise, we're going to end up in this. And what is the end of that? It is just the ladies become not only polluted, but degraded and seen as of low-class ladies. And we don't like to be in that situation for sure. But it's just a recommendation for ladies. Know where you are and find help. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a bunch of points here that have come up from that I want to go through. But to this point here, it's not simply that he blooped for a year, he also abandoned his wife, which is it's a distinct thing and coincidental with blooping. You could bloop and you just take your wife with you. Like if I was going to bloop, if such a thing were possible these days, it's one thing to bloop, and then it's another thing to leave your wife, and then it's another thing to bloop and leave your wife at the same time, which is, he took his hand off the wheel there.
And the other thing as well, sorry to just cut your throat, like,
Sure.
I mean, to cut you, it's not through your throat, cut you talk. You abandon your wife and your children, and you come back, another guy is just enjoying your wife, because at that point you abandon her. That means she's not your wife anymore. You're not a husband anymore, because you made a vow to her that whatever time they go through or situation they go through, they will be together. And you come back and say, oh, you've been doing this with my wife, and now, you have to fight with me. And so it's like, come on, don't be such a coward.
Although to be very precise about this, we actually don't know about the exact circumstances of that situation, like what was the conversation they had, what was the arrangement they made, those kind of things. We don't know that for certain, right?
Yeah.
That's really drilling down into a...
Yeah, go ahead. So I was just going to say that, they're both important perspectives that, right, male-female relationships are definitely needing a lot of redefinition and attention these days, and leaving a woman who's in a particularly vulnerable situation with children, living in a cabin in the woods sort of thing is, and then at the same time, in my opinion, the healthy response of the men in the community would be to give more protection, resistance, rigidity, and so on, as opposed to given to exploitation and so on. So I think what's important and that with both of these and drawing back from that is like we're all right now struggling worldwide with a break from the guidance of our traditions and the norms that we've around the world devised from long observance of nature and how to form a society that works with direct observation of how this world works. And so we're all struggling with a fragmentation and confusion that's arisen out of the breaking of these traditional cultures. And so I think one of the not direct but foundational necessities of a spiritual seeker is to have a basic eating, sleeping, mating, and defending culture that stabilizes our relationship with nature so that we can successfully engage in the personal work. So these are super important. Like without having these things settled, there's not really a great deal of hope for a spiritual practitioner to make good progress. And so, I think this story here does also represent a huge challenge that we all face in our day and age today of, devising some system, unique for our community, our family, that addresses these issues. A woman needs to be given a secure place inside, and within that she's the boss inside, and without that the nature of water, what most women are primarily associated with the water value system, and there's a need for a place to be given inside of a structure, and then within that they can dominate and organize and manage things in a very present tense sort of way. And so without that, they may be led to do things that they would philosophically and morally even themselves disagree with.
That is true.
So I'd like to zoom back out. Narada Das on the Hare Krishna Project podcast in the UK, he had Henry Doctorski Rishikesh Das on his podcast talking about his Guns, Gold, and Gurus book series. And at the end, he asked the question, what are the lessons that we can learn from this for the movement today? And he basically had no answer to the question. He said, I don't even really know. For me, it's been an inquiry for the past couple of decades because, as I shared, my first wife moved to New Vrindavan in 1986. She was initiated by Kirtanananda Swami as Talavan Devi Dasi. And I don't know what the significance of that is, but yeah.
Right, that was an interesting coincidence here. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But, I spent a lot of time asking her about that, asking, because to me, it was kind of like a denazification kind of issue. And I think this is an issue in that we don't hear any analysis of that situation, really. There's like kind of scurrilous, dramatic, titillating, don't talk about it, or, totally immerse yourself in it. Suachan, the perfect Prabhupada disciple, and hagiography of one character or another. And I really appreciated how you presented both sides of your father's character there, so we could see both sides of that. And yours is the first in-depth analysis that I've encountered. I've attempted to create my own, and particularly my analysis has been to answer this question, these kind of questions like institutional anartas, how to diagnose them, and what does it look like when I'm in one? Because there's a failure to account for their roles, as far as I can tell. No, there is. There's just straight up a failure to account for their roles in several high-profile leaders in ISKCON today are not giving the class, hey, here's the post-mortem of what went wrong at New Vrindavan. Like at a high level, abstract, the Adhyatmika level of what you say have described, and at the Adibhaltika level of my character, and why
Right.
what I stepped over and what it looked like. Or in other words, I was there, my senior leader deviated, and I followed him into that, and I was an accomplice. And
Yeah.
here's what I
Yeah.
learned from that. And I want you to know that I'm the senior leader now. I can deviate. And when I do deviate, this is what it will look like for you
Right.
as the next guy, because I've been where you are.
Mm.
And so, but
Mm.
I don't hear that. I don't hear
Mm.
that. And
Mm.
that's an issue for me. So
Right.
I really appreciate this analysis that you've given. And
Right.
that it, sorry, is there anything
Well, I
that you
think
want to say
that's a,
about that before I?
well, I'm just, I admire your perspective there. And you're simply, right, using a common sense and, really how does my physical sense of things match up to the philosophical, right, aspect. And you're just looking, a leader really is going to, show us the way of putting these two, not just some idealistic picture, but how does this match up to the physical realities and so on. And so I think that that perspective really is the most singularly important thing. Whatever, opinions or realizations you or I may come to, I think the important thing is really the culturing of that perspective of each of us really, right, being honest, right, about what I'm observing, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and what I want, and really coming genuinely to the table with that. So I think that's, because that will ultimately lead to that's the culture that, the fertile soil that will produce a lot of good things, unique good things from each of us. So I think that's the real important thing that I want to support, is for everybody to ask questions like that.
Mm.
And so there's also your analysis. It has like two aspects to it that I want to distinguish. There's like the bigger picture and the bigger forces that you're distinguishing, and then there's the individual character narrative on the stage. So there's the stage, and then
Yeah.
there's the actors on the stage. And on the stage you have Tirtha is living on the land. He's squatting. He has your father's bought the land. He's like, you don't tell me what to do. Kirtan and Under said that I can, and he's the big dog. Who do you think you are? And then
Yeah.
Tirtha has his own character arc. His book starts off with him shooting 3 Texas police officers and setting them on fire. I was like, dude, this is savage, man. He comes back from Nam, shoots these police officers, sets them on fire, abandons the bodies in the desert. I was like, dude. You have Daruka, the whole arc there, his wife, getting railed on the hood of the Bronco and comes back, and then the two of them get together. They go and see Bhaktipad, who says, well, in Bhagavad Gita, it says that, if one occupies the land or tries to get you off your land, or, if he kidnaps the wife, then deadly force is authorized. I'm not saying Bhagavad Gita is saying, 136 in the purport citing from
Right.
Manu Samhita. You didn't hear this from me. You can read it in there yourself, draw your own conclusion. Gentlemen, we never had this meeting, kind of thing,
Yeah.
Mm.
Right.
That's kind of the thing that I picked up about how things operated there. And I wasn't there, but like for me, seeing the shadow of it afterwards, I'm like, I can see how this thing would have rolled. But there's those characters on the stage and that whole story there, and that's a real great, monkey on a stick kind of salacious, tabloid book to sell. But then there's a whole other analysis that you've given, right? Which is this thing, which is like, you called it communistic. I'm listening to it. I'm like, dude, it sounds like fascist totalitarianism with like an autocratic dictator.
Mm.
They're basically, the same thing, right? National socialism.
That's
international socialism.
yeah, that's a indelible part of communism, is to have that, right, centralized alt totalitarian leader in it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
the state, and then you have the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, caused the First World War. That's the character narrative on the stage. But then there's the bigger forces that were operating, and you gave that analysis. And for the fringies who are living on the Tatashta Shakti between, being like, they're in the most dangerous position you can imagine, because you got the foreign adversaries who are the karmis, the them, the other. But these people are reactionary elements inside the society. They're like counter-revolutionary reactionary elements. They have to be purged in that model. If we take that analysis, it's inevitable that as the autocratic leader, I'm like, these people are the actual real enemy. The other people, the kammis that we call the enemy, are actually part of my dramatic setup, because they create the internal and the external boundary. But these guys here are puncturing the boundary and destroying the internal organizing narrative that I have. So they must be eliminated.
Yeah. And so we can kind of draw the diametrically opposed opposite sort of thing, the duality perspective, and the Vishva, right? Universal, right? It includes everything. So Vishnu, the one who is pervading everything, and therefore, possesses everything, and everything is characterizing that person. And the Vaishnava, the one who is connected to Vishnu, will necessarily be, by implication, not even as, willfully directly, but by implication will be someone who, of course, possesses as a side effect, right, a vision which is not dualistic or seeing things as adversarial or competitive or opposite, but seeing how all things, right, are making a contribution to a whole. And the focus is on what is that singular whole entity. And there's a realization that there are completely unique, different parts that can't be used to measure the other, and that don't even possess, right, an entityhood of their own without understanding their role and their separate role in a larger piece. So the communist, right, and someone who's like just a total anarchic personalist, a separatist, neither one of those. And we see today, we got like capitalistic kind of perspectives, right? We've got, more labor-oriented, communistic type of perspectives, right? We've got more anarchist type of perspectives, right? So these are like basically some of these elemental types that are recognized in the Varnashram system. But as long as we don't have this whole perspective of how these are like parts of a body, which is, right, the very simple, clear, intuitive way that the Vedic culture presents it, we're always going to see that everyone should think the way that I do. And so people who don't think the way I do need to be converted or forced or killed or controlled, right? Something like that. And so then you have these totally different, outlooks competing constantly. And so there's just, right, this samsara, this oscillating, unresolving, circular, illusory conflict going on. And so what we really want here is to establish this, right, Varnashram type of perspective, which literally, just like I was, praising your perspective and your questioning, which is simply just observing how nature works and adjusting, not artificially imposing our mentality, but let's, as adults, okay, we have formed a mentality just so we can sort of get on the stage here, but now let's reconsider, right, how we're handling the structuring of our home, first of all, my role in my own home in my own daily life, and then in the community, society, that really, right, works with our objective observable reality, right? I just can't, treat fire like I treat water, right? They have completely unique needs. So you can't treat a man like you treat a woman. You can't treat, somebody who is literally made to be an analyst, the same as you're going to treat somebody who is made to, work in physical construction and feels, totally at home there and is, so expert naturally there. So really, I think that's a big challenge we have around the world right now. But okay, are we going to now be focused on, cultural political structures? And here's where the vague things comes in. Krishna says, vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana right? Bahushaka, Hyanantascha, Abudhayo, Avyavasayanam. So like people who at least basically see that there's a singular entity right here, right? We can start there, and it's like, okay, Brahma, the absolute one entity that everything is a part of, that everything is, right? And as long as we can even see things that way, we have a chance even at answering this question. So there is sort of like a line of demarcation of, who we're going to be able to work with, right? Whether you call a Vaishnava someone who, calls the absolute entity Sri Krishna, or Vaishnava just in its literal meaning as somebody who is connected to the absolute all-pervasive person in some way or another. Anyone who really just sees at least that, everything is part, right? Then we can form a society that accepts and fosters even and wants and cultivates diversity. And so in that perspective, you don't want your laborer to be your analyst because we want a very advanced and expert and powerful labor force that are supported, and encouraged to have their own, system wherein their needs are supplied by themselves in the way they like to do it, and then they can bring that to the center. And the analysts, the people who are there and they need, the mutability and freedom of ideas, and they need their way of life, and they need their type of, ritualistic religious practices. Each one is so unique and different, and only they're going to be able to sort that out. And so in each community, there's a real process that I think all of us need to go to primarily in our own homes. And then we're going to actually be able to bring real ideas to the table when we've worked with them ourselves and seeing what works. But yeah, going outside of ISKCON think and only Srila Prabhupada knows the absolute truth, and the way that this particular group is interpreting these particular translations of the book, and whether it's been translated in the correct way, and was it Hayagriva or was it Prabhupada and Jayadvaita Swami? Well, what about just the Sanskrit and what Krishna said directly? And what about even then a larger sense of connection that to divinity as a singular entity even? And that anyone who thinks that only I, only my family, only my community, only my group knows, and everybody else should conform by hook or by crook, right? They're just not on the map yet of this vyavasaya, this resolved way of seeing everything. There's only one way to resolve everything, and that's to see that there's a center to everything. And that's not just, only Christians know, and everybody else is basically, going to hell in one way or another, right? And deserve any maltreatment, and yeah, according to law, we're not going to do that so much right now in history, but, boy, if we ever get our hands on that power again, and, same with the, it's a lot of the Islamic ideas, a lot of the Jewish ideas, a lot of this, there's like a lot of exclusivism. And it's seeped into a lot of people from a lot of traditional cultures as well. But this vyavasaya, this resolved intelligence that sees ekeha, that sees everything in one centralized context, then we can start working together.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, the first edition books or nothing, I believe, is the point you were making there. I'm being facetious, of course.
Yeah.
You did a drive-by on that controversy.
Yeah, I did.
We do a Bhagavad Gita class every day. Yeah. We do a Bhagavad Gita class every day online, and we're comparing the first and second editions, and with Prabhupada's original manuscript. And
right.
On that whole thing, I'm like, it's being in the inquiry of it. To me, like, some people are like, now I'm really upset because I've learned all the second edition ones and I found out about these changes, everything. I was like, what are you talking about? Now's your opportunity to like rediscover the whole thing newly, You spent the last 20 years learning at one thing. Now examine the other one and see what happens, what you discover in the difference between them. Like, those things there, it's like the difference and the sameness.
I mean, what's the point of a translation to me? This is just, from my perspective and opinion, is oh, this is a really important and interesting text. And to actually understand the text, we need to understand the key terms. And the thing is that these terms, these Sanskrit terms, yoga, karma, dharma, right? Like Rajiv Malhotra, for example, is one person who's part of this, kind of movement in India these days to, hey, there's a non-translatable set of terms here because they belong to an entirely different cultural perspective, right? And kind of going back again to this idea that, right, the very way we speak English with each other has a lot of darshana, perspective, vision implied and built into it, whereas the Sanskrit language also has a darshanam built into it, and really with these key terms. So we want to go and really, to me, one of the greatest things that I found from Srila Prabhupada's books was the word-for-word meanings. Because then I could really go to those words and not right. And I say that because I later on, went to many Bhagavad Gita translations to, sort of get different, what are the differences here really? And one of the main differences was only he gave the word for word meanings a lot, and of course there's, many meanings to a single word, but just that going into what is the Sanskrit meaning, and then that gives an additional perspective on Srila Prabhupada's particular translation and purport as well. But what we really want, and to me, the successful fruit there is really, what is Krishna saying here in this context, in this story with his dear close friend Arjuna? What's the literal direct meaning here, the simple, right? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right, really railed on this point in numerous episodes with famous scholars and so on, that interpolated and gave very complex explanations of things, and so he said, why don't you just take the direct, Sanskrit is a very direct language. It says what it means what it says. And so just the fact that you have to give some complicated, vast, interpolating explanation shows you haven't understood. All you have to do is tell people what's going on here and what's being said, and help them with the context and the direct speech here. What is dharma, right? And the purports are there with Srila Prabhupada, the classic Vedic definition. Some people, dharma, is that religion? Is that duty? Is that, well, none of these English words are going to work. It needs a whole full definition, and then we can understand it every time it's being said. On its base definition, the intrinsic salient features of an entity that therefore say what its behavior should be. And if it doesn't behave this way, it's kind of not that. For example.
Yeah, I don't know who said this, but or if it's a well-known thing, but a language is a theory. It's basically, it's not only an ontological theory, it is literally an ontology. It is literally a sankhya of reality.
Right.
And so, as you say, it reveals the world, but it also conceals aspects of the world. And that's just an artifact of the language, and different languages are different theories. We read the Gita in English and Spanish. We've just started translating it into Te Reo Māori, which is the native language here in New Zealand. And like, it reveals the theory of reality of the speakers of the language, and then trying to map the concepts into, from the Sanskrit. I've got ChatGPT doing it for me. And it warned me, it said, you can drop Devanagari into ChatGPT-4 and say, hey, translate this into English. And it goes, oh, this is text 3 of chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita. And then it like jumps out of translation. And it warned me, it said, I can't translate directly from Sanskrit to Te Reo Māori. So I'm going to do this by going to English and then to Te Reo Māori. And so it does that translation that way. But it reveals something of the worldview of the speakers of the language. but then considering the content of the Gita from within that worldview reveals something about the Gita that remained unrevealed or concealed for me when I considered it in English or in Spanish.
Right. Right.
And
Right. So
and
the
it reminds me,
multiplicity of perspective helped you start drawing that thread.
yes. And I'm going to bring in some comments now from the viewers. Gunjan Sharma says, totally agree on various meanings of words. Krishna can reveal various truths in various forms for different individuals. Some people who are watching, they might be like, this guy's talking about like going outside Prabhupada and reading other people's. Prabhupada gave us everything. There's the verse in the
Kind of
11th
what
canto of the
Prabhupada came to
Bhagavatam.
do, right? He was like, hey guys, check this stuff out.
Yeah, exactly. Including the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, where it says, the supreme absolute truth, who is one without a second, has been described in various ways by different sages. No, it says, although the supreme absolute truth is one without a second, he has been described in different ways by various sages. Therefore, one may not be able to obtain a complete or firm understanding from only one spiritual master. Which points to what you're saying. But if you haven't got to the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, that part of this conversation is not for you. You should finish the Bhagavad Gita as it is first,
Yeah.
And then the Bhagavatam and Prabhupada's books. And then, as you're saying, there's a world beyond that as well that he introduced us to.
Yeah, another beautiful shloka, right? So many in the Bhagavad Gita that I really love is Yavan Artha Udapane. So Yavan Tavan is just like giving an example, and just as this, so is that, right? So kind of giving an analogy. So Yavan Artha Udapane. So Artha is something that is, in this case, like something desirable. Udapane, like a water that can be gotten from a small well or a small source of water. Sarvata Sampluto Dake, can at once from a dake, from a big reservoir of water, that desire can also be satisfied at once. So Tavan, in that same way, Sarveshu Vedeshu, right? Everything that is obtainable from the Vedas, right? Brahmanasya Vijanata, the one who is a knower of Brahma, or in other words, situated in the state of consciousness, right, of Brahma, of that one without a second, and beholden to it, him, right? At once, all the things that are in the Vedas are clear, without having to like study, specifically this and that and the other thing, because that's the point of it all, is for us to come, right now to at what point in which angle do I right now have access to Brahma, to Sri Krishna? And that's the point at which basically, we all want to come to all of this, as opposed to like a ISKCON thing. The proof that we've gotten something nice from our guru, from our temple, from our translation of the Gita or whatnot, the proof of that will be when I'm interfacing with other people. Like Krishna says, he gives us a beautiful list, right, of here's how I define knowledge: humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, the recognition, that the difficulties in life. He doesn't say that birth, death, old age, and disease are bad, or that they're right. We should get rid of them.
The translation in the Gita says the evils, perception of the evils of birth, death, old age, and disease, no?
Right. So dukkha doshanu darshanam. Right. So the dosha, or the fault, right, and dukkha, right, the suffering or the unwanted experience, right, du as opposed to su, right, seeing that which is difficult or right, possessing fault, are just things to do with birth, death, old age, and disease. Those aren't personal things. So I don't need to worry about those in terms of, right, a category of personality, but these are things we deal with as living entities, right, interfacing with the world, kind of thing. So these kind of, being situated in a state where I possess humility, right, pridelessness, not that, only my perspective, and therefore I'm going to predominate over everybody, right, tolerance, right? I have a large capacity for experiencing polar opposites, right? Non-violence, right? All these kind of qualities, that's knowledge. He's listing states of consciousness as knowledge. Not like you should have memorized this many shlokas, you should have gotten a Diksha mantra from a guru in a specific. So Krishna never says any of that. He says Diksha, but again, Sanskrit non-translatables. What's going on there? Does Diksha have to have a rita, right? A particular rite that's done with a homa, with a fire? Well, that's going to definitely be from a Brahmanistic, part of society with that kind of tradition in play. But Diksha, again, is a transformational part of our, right, maturation as a spiritual person that is going to happen in personal relationship with somebody who initiates us into a state of consciousness. So, right, it's the proof that we've gotten something from Srila Prabhupada or our guru or our camp or our family or whatever is going to be how much pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, right? Recognition that, my problems and suffering are not because of me or you, right? But we can just, say that, yeah, we require some expertise in dealing with eating, sleeping, mating, and defending with the body here so that we can deal with the real personal things that we want to deal with and all these things. So why waste time talking about your sect or my sect? How about, here's what I'm coming with, me, as I'm present before you right here. And now let's deal.
I'll get you to, if you've got comments or questions, just 1 second though. Just think about that. I just want to bring in a couple of things here. To your point earlier, you were saying about, doing the work at home and understanding about who you are, to function in community together in harmony, there's a necessity to know thyself, right? Stoker Krishnaji, Sergey Levyakin, is asking, Dear Bhima Karma Prabhu, is it possible to book a palm reading session with you, please? How can people get in touch with you? And I'll drop that into the comments. What's your website?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for the palmistry thing, gosh, I'm not so good at this marketing thing, so I'll have to actually I'll have to give you a link, but
okay,
but you
we'll
can
get
certainly
that.
get me on Facebook is an easy way for anybody to sort of reach out to me. So Bhima Karma Saragrahi is my name on Facebook, right? And so you can just send me a message there. BhimaKarma@gmail is my email address. You can reach out to me there. And I like to be a bit more personal. I tend to be less of a marketer and so on. So I like keeping things personal and individual. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Here's a comment. This is from my mother who's watching. Hi, Mum. She says, it's courageous for this man to share so openly, honest, packed from experiences and foresights. These issues are faced within many social groups. To err is human. We are human. We cannot force people to group up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, an acknowledgement of your authenticity and vulnerability in your sharing. And, yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, certainly. There's a great deal of, things that anyone who's been part of any more concentrated sort of totalitarian form of thinking where everybody should be the same will have experienced to one degree or another the things that I experienced in a concentrated form, right? Like I was beaten severely most of my childhood, almost a daily amount. A lot of devotees don't really get it. A lot of people don't get it. The people who have kids, everybody has seen kids obviously and interacted with them, but how many of us have actually been physically present with the child being beaten to the point of yelping like a dog, bouncing around on the ground, and the person keeps hitting them while they're begging and crying out in pain for mercy? That, right, as I speak it, even my hair is standing up. Unless we've gotten some sense of that, we don't really know what is being spoken about when people come forward and are talking about these things. It can kind of just run through an intellectual sort of picture, but when we really consider the gravity of these things, and that some of us were in the name and the guise of spiritual culture, Krishna consciousness, and so on a daily basis for our entire childhoods, being subject to, and this is just one single little graphic picture I'm giving you inside of a, what for all of us was our whole childhood, our whole lifetime as children, being raised as devotees. And instead, what we get is this totally opposite picture. And a lot of people now, even the now generation of young people who have grown up in ISKCON after gurukuls were, for the large part shut down, or not able to function in these ways. Even they don't give deference or gravity or recognition or respect or any second thought to a lot of us who paved the way to their more you can say in those senses safe existence. A lot of the younger people who call themselves gurukulis and so on in ISKCON, they don't get it, what to speak of a lot of it. So these are really intense things that are very important for people like me, to interact with the larger public and sort of share, not in a philosophical, but here's a person, I'm coming with my experience, and I can convey the gravity, of a teacher entering a room at night and touching the private parts in private, and the confused child, innocent and curious, what is this? What are you doing? And the skin crawling, and there's discomfort, but no ideas to even process this physical experience. And sexual energy has a very unique set of physical experiences that it activates. Yeah, we all need to take a breath, right? This is a pretty intense sort of thing, but it's like the child's ideas and literally the physical nervous system has not developed to be able to process these things, right? And so this is what Krishna consciousness is. It's when someone talks on the Vyasa-sans, and we do, and even that person, the teacher, is like chanting their Gayatri and shaved up, and they took their Diksha, they memorized their shlokas, and then you have this as well, right? And what does this do even, for that person, right? When I, and, not just me, but my whole generation, when we enter a temple these days, and, the whole of the society structure still in a state of willful ignorance to these factual, experience, these things that we experience, that we hold. I didn't hear about it. I lived it. I still live it. And this whole sense that a guru is someone appointed, someone who's given a certificate or a title by some group of people, and for me, I've been immunized to this very notion that anything is defined by a title or a term. But instead, Sanskrit teaches us that we call a thing by a certain term, by its dharma. How does it actually behave? What are its qualities? And just the notion that a guru or anybody in a particular position in society is that based on some group of people giving it that tag, as opposed to, no, it's about guna and karma, the observable behavior and measurable qualities and characteristics of that person. And so there's a real, just my physical presence in a temple, I kind of, and my group, we bring a sort of reckoning and a threat, in a sense, to this whole perspective that gurus can be named by a rubber stamp or a vote or something like this, and that anyone who's supporting and participating in that sort of hierarchical, rubber stamp sort of, renunciate sannyasi, appointed people are gurus, right, is really an affront to just who I am and what I am, and I'm an affront to who they are and what they are. And I try to be, by nature, I'm a polite person, so I don't like try to go and, confront people and, in any sort of violent, turbulent way. But, it's there. And so I hope to have, as many conversations as possible, although you'll never find, I don't try to push myself out there into these public conversations. But I think these are really important conversations to have with people like me who grew up in it and who have, who carry this. And you can see I'm not coming with any spite or anything like that, but just with an important, sober observation that there's a culture of Krishna culture, like what he actually preached and taught directly himself, which is recognize things by their guna and their karma. He never taught that you need to be part of a sect or a cult, or, sects and cults are great to facilitate formation of group and community, in terms of, hey, we all have babies, we all have weddings, we all have celebrations, and so on. So we want community centers that are dispensaries for how to dance, how to cook, how to be an engineer. Right? That's really what a temple is, but how to do these things in a way that foster, right, spiritual culturing of the person in doing these things, but not in the form of like, there's one way to be religious or one way, and this guru indoctrination thing really, I think is a interesting little plug to pull.
Mm. Oh yeah, sorry, I thought it was blocked. Thank you for being open to discuss about those very traumatic and vulnerable time of your life as a child. And I hear you are open to discuss about this because, as you say, you're not here and, spiteful and hateful, all of that. But I think it's very important because if as a victims we keep it quiet, somebody else, a child, a woman, a young person is going through that. And the biggest problem here is because, as you say, these guys were doing this to me and I was confused as a child. I couldn't process. In one hand, they say this, and the other hand, they're doing this. So there are many people, especially in these religious groups and these swamis, so-called swamis, they are taking the power or, their power in this society or the religious groups to actually manipulate people and for some reason mesmerized. Not sure if they done some sort of black magic to themselves that they have to go this power of like shutting people and people unable to speak up, fearful to speak up. They manipulate many devotees or people in general by, or even the most abominable, even as a saintly person commits the most abominable acts, you just, accept them as a saintly and vow down and so and so. And sorry.
You see that.
Yeah. And they're so fearful. People in general are so fearful to speak up, to say, hey, like your father. He did not have any fear because he was saying, you are teaching this and you are pretending to do this, but in reality, you're doing that. What is this? And that's exactly the kind of people we need right now in this Krishna conscious world, where it says, you know what are you doing is not correct. Let's have a man-to-man discussion here. Very open, so people know where we are. We need that. We don't want people
Mm.
hiding there. Oh, God is going to punish me and I'm going to be going to the hellish planet. It's just all manipulation. That is my opinion. And for you to come forward and discuss about what you went through for these people that represent being saintly, being being leaders in this Krishna conscious world, and teaching us to elevate ourselves and to get closer to Krishna, to clean ourselves, transform ourselves. Actually, they're not doing that.
Mm.
And we need to hold them accountable for this. Because the more we stay quiet, the longer the suffering, the more people will go through that. And even people that stay quiet are the participants in this. Do we want to be like that? I don't think so. Do we want to allow these people in saffron clothes to continue manipulating? And probably they are mafia bosses. I have no idea. But it sounds like that. We need to unpack all of this.
Yeah. Well, anytime we have a marriage of spiritual power, right, religious power, political power, financial power, all in the same place together, that, like you're saying, mafia, that's literally what that is. And Vedic culture, right, we'll recognize Vedic culture wherever it's manifest by seeing that these clearly different departments are managed by themselves, right, and are simply provided a structure by one of those groups, right, the Kshatriya group, right, simply a playing field, right, here's a game, and I'm going to protect the rules of the game, right, but then there's all kinds of completely unique functions that they, right, by rule of even what they are, can't, so whenever you see this crossover sort of right, all these different things working together, like a guru is also a managerial authority, like that's literally an oxymoron. And that a guru can be appointed, or a guru can be, like, you have a multiple choice of who you can choose as a guru, and they first of all have to be part of our group, and then second of all, sannyasis are, these days that's sort of fading away, right? But right, that's oxymoronic to what a guru is.
Totally.
There's a real the dharma of the individual, when the individuals act according to their qualities, so the guna and karma, then there's a natural distribution of power in the society, because the social orders of life, it's not that we're going to condemn someone to, doing this and being this. It's like, that's at the intersection of what you're naturally enthused to do, what you're energized by, and you effortlessly produce results in relative to other people. And when everybody locates themselves in that, you find out that the social body falls out in a particular shape and form.
Yeah.
Whereas what we're seeing here is like a massive centralization of power and responsibility and authority in a few people, and then a disempowerment of everyone else, and a disempowerment of all the other roles. And one of the things that I really appreciate about this conversation and your presentation is, while we have the character on the stage and we can see that, it doesn't fall into this kind of, and the answer is we need to find the bad guys and crucify them, and then the problem is solved. Right. And kind of like some of the movements I see around this Vedic, child protection kind of thing is, the whole thing is we get the individual personalities who are responsible for having done this and crucify them, and then that's the problem solved. I'm like, there's some structural underlying the stage itself that needs to be addressed. And I guess both of them need to be there. In other conversations I've been in, with me being like, hey, it's the structural problem that needs to be addressed rather than piecemeal whack-a-mole go after the individual people. I mean, I'd be interested to get your perspective and thoughts on this.
Well, I think you're just saying both are important, right?
Yes. And so in terms of the stage part of it, it's like one response is we need a central child protection office and then a distributed child protection office. And I was just like, bro, that sounds like communism to me. Like, we're going to centralize this authority and this function into a department. Like, I was like, it doesn't seem like that. And then I was like, it seems to me that Krishna's child protection program is the cooler. It's like, it's literally
Yeah.
the family.
How about a
Like,
family?
the father
Yeah.
and mother are the child protection officers. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So there's this sort of invisible foregone conclusion, right? That, like you're saying, the centralization, that there's this foregone conclusion that things should be centralized. And now only people who align with, right, a societal structure will be given position, authority, recognition, honor, respect. Already, right? So before we even take a step, the whole thing's already destroyed.
that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, if you have a failure in a family, okay, there's a failure there. If you have a failure in a centralized child protection office, it's like, dude, distribute the authority, responsibility, and the points of failure. That's Krishna's system.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if there's something central, right, it's the adhyatmic versus the adibautic, right? The internal, right, principle, right, idea, and the concept that needs to be with every individual family, with every individual community. You need to form that uniquely for your community. So the mandate, the central mandate is you need to do this. You need to answer this question. But for yourselves, not that there's some sort of central dictation of everybody does it this way. What can be done is like, these are the end results that we want to achieve. So, and the great thing is that when you just put it this way, every community is going to come up with, a unique way of approaching it that suits them. And then there can be like a very healthy competition with who is achieving these desired end results with more success. And there's an exchange of ideas, and then there's cultural development.
I see you and your character as being like the expression of this like radical responsibility. It's kind of like you could have taken the position that my life sucks, all this bad stuff happened to me because of this centralized institution. Therefore, the centralized institution is to blame. When we identify the perpetrators and punish them, then I'll be okay. Then I'll be powerful, Until that happens, I'm disempowered. But you didn't take that. It's like all of that happened to you, and it like has taken nothing away from you.
Yeah, in fact, I think when any of us, right, we really address and confront and respond to the things that have come our way, right, and even to the character that has come my way, all of us become invaluable and important members of our community to the degree we do this at any particular moment in time. And so yeah, I think I have a lot of value to offer to the degree that I have, right, done that, and I'm now interfacing with you from this honest, perspective, and that's our journey. That's our journey.
Gunjan Sharma says, lots of respect to any human who goes through so much in life and comes out on the other side as a healer. Kapai.
Yeah, you understand better the position because you went through that, and you can understand other people going through that. You know how much it hurts. You know how much it is in your mind and in your system, how much the trauma is deposited there. You understand that, and because of that, you're a real healer.
Yeah, and even something beyond understanding is like, right, our ability to, like Krishna says, right, matra sparshasta konteya, right, the degree to which we can hold polar opposites of experience without being disturbed. Right, it's not the degree to which we understand this philosophy and can sort of reason with it, that we should tolerate polar opposites of sukha dukkha and ushna and sita, but literally, how much can I sit here and tolerate these polar opposites? So okay, because I've sort of to one degree or another faced these things, when other people come before me, as opposed to just understanding something, because I literally hold a large capacity for pain, for anguish, for rage, right, and for hope, right, for depth, for hopelessness. And because I've allowed these experiences to push into me and give me that capacity that comes with the experience as I digest it, when other people come with these experiences that they're failing to hold, we can lend each other our nervous systems in these different capacities, and immediately the person on the spot begins to grow these capacities by simply being together in this genuine personal way. And that's really what a big part of healing is about: less understanding and more being present to each other in this conscious state. I can hold a lot of hopelessness, a lot of pain, a lot of despair, right? A lot of being invaded and so on, and still being okay. I can be in this, I don't need to resist it. And that is now I can be safe to have this experience.
I think this topic is a very powerful topic to do another podcast, and also because you're open to discuss about what happened in young Bhima Karma, going through all of these experiences, and the people who they were giving you that experiences that weren't pleasant, of course, and how you come out of through all of that. It will guide, it will give a lot of hope. It will become a pillar for them having a discussion about this. Would you be willing to do another podcast about this, Prabhu?
Yeah, certainly. I'm always happy to speak about these things.
Yeah, fantastic. I'd like to give this last question for a gear shift completely to Rupa Cameron, because I've got no idea what this is about, but this is going to be awesome. Okay, let's ride out with this. Rupa's saying, I wanted to ask about the connections between Pushti Marg and Gaudiya Vaishnava traditions, Mahabhav to Mridanga.
Wow.
What does that even mean?
A beautiful question. So Pushti Marga, is another term for Vaishnavism, and it's specifically sort of, you can say, a brand of Vaishnav darshanam or perspective that was sort of the term coined by Vallabhacharya, who belongs to this idea of the Rudra Sampradaya, Vishnu Swami line, and so basically coming out of my experiences in ISKCON, Mridanga was something that really provided a sense of continuity to my experience as a Krishna Bhakta. And I went to India really to study Mridanga, and I ended up doing that for a long time. But in India, I connected to Pushti Marg. I just got to know one particular Shamdas. He was a famous Pushti Marg Vaishnava. Some people may know him. Passed away several years ago now. But Pushti Marg is basically, it has some interesting sameness and difference with ISKCON or with Gaudiya Vaishnavism as a larger group even. So even, so Govardhan Hill, is this long, hill, and Radhakund is on, one side and one end of Govardhan. And on the opposite side and the opposite end of Govardhan is Jatipura, Yatipura or Gopalpur, its ancient name, where Srinathji, some people may know Srinath, used to reside. And this is kind of a stronghold place, you can say, of the Pushti Marg. So Pushti Marg, you don't hear about it much. What is Pushti Marg? What do they even do? What's their philosophy? Because preaching is sort of not, it's discouraged. So Vallabhacharya, he would wherever he would travel, he would sit on the outskirts of a village or place, and he would whoever is meant to come to me, whoever Thakurji Sri Krishna wishes will come to me, and that's that. Because this isn't for everybody. This particular type of Vaishnava is just not for everybody, and so how does a Pushti Marga person, enact their practice and their performance of seva? is really a home-based system where the home is the mandir. And so you require a home, you require an economy, you require a griha, you require a husband and a wife and an economy working and a family working, right? So renunciation isn't, really praised in any specific way. In fact, it's sort of seen as a disadvantage in this particular way of doing bhakti, because you really don't have very nice things to give Krishna. You don't have salt for your roti, kind of thing, So, there's even a famous story of sannyasin bhakta and a shopkeeper who's quite wealthy and fat, and loves perfumes and scents and fine foods, and they both kind of come to Vallabhacharya and they want diksha, and they want to be given seva, Thakurji seva, and so he doesn't give it to the sannyasi and say, if I give you Thakurji Swarup, right, a deity, right? Well, Krishna's not. He's going to be put through a lot of hardship, and I don't want to give Krishna hardship, But if I give a Swarup, to this Vaishya kind of a person, right? This mercantile class person who loves fine food and appreciates scents and aromas and fine silks and robes, and the guy in the story says so much, is like I love Krishna, and so I just, but I love these silks and these foods, and he's like, great, because you're going to take such good care of and offer him the finest things, and so on, like that. So it's a unique brand. It's not for everybody. It's not preached. It's not like, even when you go into Mita Pushti Marga, or get into it, it's not easy to really even get people who will tell you about it, or in texts that'll really give it to you, especially in English. And so there's some really interesting contrasts. And so, like you were saying earlier, right, that having these different perspectives, right, sort of helps understand a common thread. And I think this is really important at this juncture in history for all of us, not just ISKCON people, but Pushti Margas, South Indian Vaishnavas, and all kinds of spiritualists, to look at, and understand and get to know people and form relationships with, other types of Vaishnavas, to understand that thread. Like what's really the spirit here of Vaishnavism, and what is my unique, sort of flavor and offering to the larger Vaishnav culture. And so that's Pushti Marg. And then the Mridang, all of this is very interesting. We could do a whole nother thing on this, but the Kirtan culture, right, that really evolved in Braj, right, the larger Braja region there, specifically in that, as some call it, a Bhakti Renaissance period, where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Vallabhacharya were contemporaries. Vallabhacharya was, a bit older in age from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but there was a common Vaishnav culture there in Braj region, where there was a prevalent musical system employed for the use in Kirtan, which is simply a musical articulation of the Bhagavat philosophy, where Krishna's Swarup, its dimensions and proportions, right, its bhuva sva, its, right, 10 directional system where all the main deities are situated, that becomes the framework and the logic system of the tala, the rhythm, the raga, right, the emotional coloring, and the pada, the actual meaningful words, right, and so on in the kirtan system, which later became even more specifically branded by Srinivasa Acharya and the Manoharshai system, sampradaya that I study in continually, and also in Garanhati, right, from Gorera Hatta, the Narottam Das Thakur's style of kirtan that evolved, and then the Reneti system that evolved, right, in Orissa with Shyamananda Pandit. But all of these are essentially branches of the same Dhruvapada or Drupada system of music that has been, we can't really trace out how many thousands of years the musical system employed by Kirtan, because it's simply the musical system which is, a translation of the same Bhagavad philosophy into musical terminology. And so, for, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, right, just for Vaishnavas, right, this is a very important thing, especially for those of us who, right, carry, some spirit and some enthusiasm for the Yuga Dharma, right, or the very appropriate form of practicing yajna, or the individual's contribution to the community, as being Sangha Kirtana, right, or the Kirti, the glorification being done in a Sangha, in a group, which requires tala, which requires a structure that is natural and common to everybody without any mental imposition being required, right? And so the Pushti Marga, right, also all of their old padas or poems, right, will speak about Mridanga Bajave, right? And so Gaudiya also, Mridanga, ancient Natya Shastra texts, more than 2,000, 3,000 years old, speaks very clearly what is that Mridanga, what is its exact shape, proportion in terms of how many hastas and hand measurements, everything is very well described in terms of the shape of the haritaki fruit. There's 3 types of mridanga, one associated with Vishnu, one with Brahma, one with Shiva, and these are mentioned in Ramayana, Mahabharata, right? All of the ancient Vedic texts talk about this mridanga and raga. Narad Muni speaks about it, Bharat Muni, right? We have such an amazing depth right at our fingertips with this Kirtan Vaishnav culture that ties all the world's religions together, all the world's architecture together, all the world's philosophical systems, ritual practices, right? Dress styles, musical colorings and behaviors, just the whole thing. It requires simply all of us to step out of our sectarian way of thinking and become more authentic, unique individuals contributing to a whole. Just being in relationship with each other in that way. And then add, we can get together and actually read these texts together instead of relying on institutionalized gurus. The point is to read the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavat and really understand what's being said for ourselves. And then, in Kirtan, be in the bhava and the flowing mood of that. Let the understanding take its form there.
Mm-hmm.
Which Kunda
Sorry,
says,
I know I'm a
epic.
rambler. Sorry about that.
No,
That's great.
Love it.
Looks
Love
like
it.
Rupa's happy with the answer. There's a whole worlds within worlds there.
I have a question, Prabhu, about the what was it, the mark?
Pushti Marg.
Pushti mark. So you mentioned it's quite rare, it's not easily accessible, there is no books for that.
Underground.
It's underground. And it sounds like very, very specific to Grihasta. It's a Grihasta? Yeah.
Grihasta, yeah.
Grihasta life. And because we are Grihastas, it will be interesting to not sure have access somehow to that.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, there are plenty of texts. It's just that right, there's not a preaching culture. In fact, there's sort of an anti-preaching culture too that goes with the Pushti Marg. It's more like a secretive sort of secret society kind of, but not quite a secret society. But it's like I'm not going to go out and try to advertise, and sort of change people to be this. Mm-hmm. It's more like those who have a natural born interest and calling, will be curious and interested, and sort of thing. But so there are texts, but there's certainly not a whole lot there's some stuff, but there's not a whole lot in English. And it's sort of, because of that, it's sort of developed over these hundreds of years in a very, sort of specific way. But I think the more that we discover all the different, colors of Vaishnavism, right? The point is to really form our own personal home culture. And all of these beautiful various, like the more flowers that we smell and we see and we grow will help us to appreciate what is a flower, right? And so what is Vaishnavism? Who is Vishnu? Who is Sri Krishna? Will be appreciated by being able to form meaningful, deep relationships with people, various people who have formed personal relationships with him. Not just in, only these particular people are, Vaishnavas, and and in fact that will give us the Samadarshana, even a dog in this broader sense, and every living entity. Right? Wow, everybody's just dancing in this Krishna dance.
I think that's brilliant, and I'm very curious now about the
Well,
Push
Gaudiya
Kumar.
Vaishnavism is just, we have some particular brands, some particular sects within Gaudiya Vaishnavism who just are, at this point in history, have become a bit stronger or edgy in this sort of renunciation promulgation. There was no sannyas ashram before Bhaktisaranta Saraswati was kind of dealing with the, Ram Krishna mission sannyas, thing. That,
He was like, these guys are killing it in the market. We're going to rip off their packaging.
Yeah. But I mean, before that, there was no sannyas. It wasn't a thing in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But whereas now, a lot of ISKCON people, just as a sort of foregone conclusion that's just stated as implication, never even directly spoken, but just sort of understood that, renunciation is a measurement of how spiritual, renunciation of sex, of, bodily pleasures and this kind of, right, is somehow tantamount to spiritual maturity or advancement, when if you look at the direct teachings of Sri Krishna, you won't find that anywhere.
Even the use of the word renunciation there, you're signifying like a restriction of the senses from the sense objects, which is in the text of Bhagavad Gita. You'll find, withdrawing the senses from the sense objects, and then in the purport you'll find engaging the senses in Krishna consciousness. Yeah. We were contrasting with Radha Krishna's Bhagavad Gita. He's saying controlling, and then Prabhupada's like engaging, engaging the mind in Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, totally. And and that's why Sri Krishna is talking about it in terms of Jnana Yoga, in terms of Karma Yoga, in terms of Buddhi Yoga, in terms of Bhakti Yoga, because we have, right, different types of individuals who have different sets of values, different sets of understandings, difference, right? It's so important that, we first of all come as people here. I think that's the primary important thing here.
It's interesting these days to observe, we have these renunciates having very opulent houses. Who they get the houses, how they get the houses, I don't know. Getting very, very in the secret, getting into the secret life of these guys, I would call guys. It would be interesting how much money they have in their bank account.
And then you have like real kind of people that you can see are really renounced, like Ayendra Prabhu. He's like objectively, I mean, even just, but it's like, dude, how many people can do that? I mean, that's an extraordinary personality. Just stay in one place and just chant Harinam and Kirtan just like forever. And then like, give up your body in a fire. And it's like, dude, I'm like,
it's a very poignant example.
Respect.
As anyone who knows about Ayendra, I knew him personally, those years living in Vrindavan, a lion who is very courageous and outspoken and passionate and so on. Only a person who, right, isn't fearful, not because of, some kind of mental adjustment, but because they're not attached to external things that can be taken away from them, right? So a person who is renounced isn't afraid. And so their speech and their opinions, right, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, what's very valuable about a renunciate is they're someone who doesn't have material things to protect. And so, whatever they're saying is at least an honest opinion.
Oh, man. And so to your point before, a guru who's also a managerial authority, they're just complete conflict of interest right there.
Yeah.
So then we know, okay, whatever they're calling, by this title, whatever it may be, we should start we can just encourage each other to, hey, let's define things by the dictionary definition and call a politician, and a guru, and a renunciate, and look at the symptoms. You're right, Prabhupada says, a sannyasi has died. Their material identity has been given up, and therefore they are a lion, and that's why they're the guru of the four varnas and ashrams, because they're not tied to, they're free to speak for everybody else who may be afraid to speak. But instead we see the opposite's going to happen when if we're thinking a sannyasi is in a pointed position carrying a danda, right? But who's holding
Sounds very
political
funny,
position.
though.
Yeah.
It looks very funny, and then they have this posture of like, and gravity of talking, and it's like, seriously? You cannot be any faker than you are right now. Like, just be human. Just interact like you're interacting with a soul, right? And like,
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be thinking about a woman and spit at the sort of sex with a woman and so. Like, why are you talking with a woman? Why are you giving so many jobs to women?
And
why are you
the
collecting
sad
so
thing
many
is,
women?
many of these people may have really valuable qualifications: depth, gravity, detachment, right? Lack of sensuality. Fine. Right. It's just sadly that whenever any of us, right, are unconsciously complicit or consciously complicit in this type of a societal structure, right? Maya pahrita jnana, right? Knowledge is stolen by some basic illusions that are in place here.
Yeah,
Whereas
and that's why.
as soon as, go ahead.
Oh, that's just why the lack of distinguishing what happened at New Vrindavan, to me, it just says the same dynamic it's just inevitably will be in play. If they're not still acting under the influence of it, the next, those of us who are here now, we will be affected in the same way, because it's like, if you went through that and you saw it happen, what did you learn from that? Like, how come you don't give the inoculation to the next generation of devotees? Like, this is what to look out for.
Headmasters of the Gurukulas, right? Who is at the time, this is about 3-4 years ago now. I saw him in Vrindavan, and he was under, public, another public scrutinizing sort of, you can say, attack, or just being brought into this, microscope of, and he, I know him, and because I'm a fairly, neutral person. He like, what do you think I should do? He said, and I said, well, you write a lot of books about these esoteric, Radha Krishna Leela philosophical things, but we have plenty of that from generations of acharyas and Sri Krishna himself and so many, but what you and only you can bring to this community is your story of how a sincere devotee ends up being the headmaster of a gurukula where all of the kids are abused and sexually molested, and all these things happen. That's the story we need to hear, and your realizations coming out the other end of that. And it's like, if you were to write a genuine account of this, I will recognize you as a guru and a spiritual teacher, as a genuine guru and spiritual teacher, because that would take real renunciation, bravery, insight, and wisdom, and actual application of this philosophy. His immediate, oh, I can't do that, just came out of his mouth.
Yeah, you lose your standing in the society because you have to pretend that the stage is solid. You have to pretend that the stage is completely solid, that you're all standing on, and that when someone falls through the stage, it's due to the failure of the individual. No matter how many times
I challengingly say to all people out there that if your guru or leader or community hasn't or doesn't openly address these very important topics of murder, child abuse, fraud, deception, all these kind of deviations, what are you really following here?
Mm,
You know, is that a guru?
exactly.
That's,
You know what? That is good that you say things like that. I don't know what they're following. I agree with you, Prabhu. I don't know what these guys are following. And you know what's the worst part? Is the ISKCON are formed with these clowns, so attached to power, they cannot put things. Let's say this. If there is something like that, like a child rape, in this organization that Srila Prabhupada has created for the benefit of all the people in society for thousands and millions of years, and you are allowing for that to go undercover and talk, I don't know what is the position of these guys. I just don't know. And now they have this so-called, ISKCON law for this. You cannot do this. You have to follow the ISKCON law. So what kind of ISKCON law have you created? If you cannot meet all of these exact things that are destroying what Srila Prabhupada created, the ISKCON of Srila Prabhupada, and if you think you really do care about it, and you presenting Srila Prabhupada, and you defending Srila Prabhupada, and you know that you're not doing anything about it, it's dragging years and years. Many people are suffering because of that. Many souls have left because of that. And guess what? This guy is just on the high horses, No, we following the ISKCON laws, so you guys just cool down, like treating people like they were like a minute, insignificant little entities. What is the respect for the soul that Krishna himself has given you to protect as a brahmana?
We're in the dangerous Tatashta zone now. Because if you're a loyal member and you keep your mouth shut and you don't call anything out, you're okay. If you bloop and you go away and you become inimical, and you can be cast as the blooped envious devotees, both of those work with the system. It's the ones who they go, well, they're inimical and they're blaspheming the devotees, and as a result, they're going to fall down, lose their faith in Sri Krishna and go away. It's when people don't do that they become the reactionary elements, the counter revolutionary elements on the border, which is kind of where we are now. I was thinking about Kundali Prabhu the other day. He's like trying to find him, and he's like disappeared completely. I was
really?
like, yeah, apparently,
be a better brick.
Yeah, he's
It's
gone.
one of his coined terms there.
Be a better brick.
Yeah. On one of the covers of his books, right? He had a little picture of a little brick with a little happy face there, and it's like a lot of GBCs that I've confronted. I know many of them because I grew up in ISKCON and have private conversations, and they'll be like, "Well, in my zone, in my temple, in my field, I try to be a better and make because it's really important that we don't get caught up in this GBC politics thing, right? It's more important that in the community or in the temple we're in and so on, we so there's like don't disturb the societal structures so that we can do the preaching inside of the temple thing, and so be a better brick. But what you're doing really is putting whatever sattvic qualities and goodwill that you have in service of that larger institutional structure, right? That is promoting really a culture of assumed foregone labeling conclusions instead of a culture of individual, unique, personal exploration and skill development in speaking about these things. That okay, how do I at once support the community and its cohesion, as flawed as it is right now, while still in that circle holding right uncomfortable, painful, outrageous truths. That is skill, right? And being able to separate, just like the separate pieces of society, the physical, objective truths that we're talking about separately before we talk about opinions about them. What are the facts? Separately, what is my subjective opinion and perspective on, not my emotions? This is what I think. And I'm not saying it's true, but I can honestly say what I think and what perspective I'm coming. And then it will be very clear why I feel the way I feel, what I feel, and my emotions will then have, right, a good place here. I can fully express them because I've given them context. And then it'll be also made evident my heart's desire, because this is what I want. Because what I really want here is I want my temple community, right? My Krishna devotee community. I want to be able to come here and have prasadam and kirtan. I love that. But when I see, when I hear these things, it seems to me like there is a deep disparaging chasm, right? The philosophy is one side, that this is, and right, and so I feel torn, I feel angry, I feel, right? And you see how this is a culture, right? A skill building, right? Of how do we all come with this culture? And you see, if we just are able to do this and give these things, these people, their separate individual place inside of us, in the community, everything we make will become beautiful. And even the most immediately difficult, right, poisonous sort of things can be dealt with. And even though the very people who we may see as the worst people, right, in front of us, and the symbols of everything we hate and despise, we can say, hey, these things happened. And it seems to me like you are willfully hiding them. And so I feel, angry towards you. I feel like I want to, tear you apart. I want to tear you out of your position, right? Because what I want, what my heart wants here, is a society, where we're happy together, we're doing kirtan together, like, and so on. So, like, for example, and I just want to put on all of us the onus and the responsibility to find a way like this to, right, address things in a way that truly serves our heart's natural desires.
I love it.
That would be more powerful, that they themselves come forward, or at least hear the people that are saying we want to change it. I said, what do we do? Obviously, they are intoxicated with whatever is happening with them, whatever wealth and, adoration. They may be intoxicated.
Well, I think Prabhu's point is, if we rather than they.
Yeah. It can be two. You never know. You never know. Krishna can touch them and say, you know what, boy, come on. And they was like, oh my gosh, I have to do something. Miracles can happen. I'm not going to say
if we skillfully address these things, even in a seemingly, like, for example, a Bhagavatam class or a festival, like, that's the time when everybody should just kind of like not talk about controversial, right? But if we have the skill and the sincerity that I'm not coming here from not even a morsel of attack or violence, but at the same time, because I'm just telling you my honest opinion and what facts I'm addressing, I can now fully express my emotions, no matter how difficult and uncomfortable and adversarial they may be, because I frame them in a way that's not attacking. I'm just telling you, here's how things seem to me. I'm not even claiming it's right. But you see, this way of addressing things allows us to address these people and these issues in a way that leaves us not only invulnerable to counterattack, right? Because I'm not fighting your type of fight. In fact, that's what I'm not doing. Just by the way I'm addressing things, right? I'm suggesting we all do this. Address the facts, reveal honestly my opinion, my stance here. And here's and you can see my emotion, feel, I'm here. I'm upset. But you can address the cause for my being upset. You can even address, maybe I got the facts wrong. But then a healthy, real discussion. And if people don't want to engage in that discussion, then we can even address that. Well, by the fact that you're shutting down this discussion, you don't want to engage in it, but your position seems to call for it. It seems to me, right? And therefore my opinion is that you don't deserve the position that you're in, and in fact you're behaving in an opposite manner. And so I feel disappointed, I feel angry, and I feel afraid even that I could be ostracized even for speaking here. And what I really want is a safe environment for healthy discussion to happen.
Yeah, I love it.
It is powerful, and that reminds me to the win-win communication.
Yeah, when you do this, I feel this, I need. It's a communications pattern.
Yeah.
We're coming up to the top of the hour.
Yeah,
Let's go to concluding remarks, eh?
Is that
Okay, sure, I'll go first, and then you, and then we'll let Prabhu have the last word. Illumination of the dissident. It's where we started from in the historical narrative of the Leela of Bhima Karma on Earth during the 28th Manvantar Kali Yuga. In the Sankirtan Leela of Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada. The elimination of the dissident is still an issue, a structural issue. The hard formation of the fascist society and then the other. And it's also limiting this Param Vijayate, the total world victory, because, unless we're able to accommodate a wide spectrum of people, perspectives, then we remain only a small group within some wider context rather than becoming the context for the world itself. So there needs to be an expansion there. So that's like a structural defect or structural anarta or some aspect of the stage that the action is taking place on, the stage that is created and that is omnipresent in the theory of language that we use to talk about and to describe and to conceptualize what this mission is on the earth. So there's still that to address. It was back then, hasn't really been fully distinguished yet. And then at the same time, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for devotees who came from New Vrindavan to New Zealand, and pushed on Srila Prabhupada's mission here. So Krishna can draw a straight line with a bent stick, and he can take advantage of even an imperfect instrument to create something in the world, and he is doing that. So I want to acknowledge both of those things being simultaneously present in this, imperfect instruments and carrying out Krishna's will, and that part is glorious.
Yeah.
And I've really appreciated someone, Ganchan Sharma, I think, said best podcast ever to date out of all the ones we've done. This is episode number 21 or 22. So
22.
Episode 22, the best one, the highest
Master number
point.
22.
And then there are so many possibilities that I see opening up for this. Like, we only touched the surface here with so many things. We have the Ayendra episode coming up with the Kinchana Krishna Prabhu, who was in Vrindavan and did all the interviews with people for the so if it's possible, and if you'd like we'd love to have you come on for that as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Given your, we can discuss that later, see if you're interested and open to that.
I had my own specific tiny little angle in there.
Great, interesting. As you do with everything. And it's just a real, it's, again, I don't necessarily agree with everything, and I don't have to agree with everything, but like so much perspective and depth, and to be simultaneously present with that particular experience of life that you've had with respect to ISKCON, the organization, and the response that you've had, it's incredibly humbling and inspiring for me at the same time. And it fills me, one thing you said is that you have a huge capacity for hopelessness, but your presence and your speaking fills me with a huge amount of hope. for the movement and for the future and for humanity. Thank you. Davey?
I appreciate your courage, Prabhu. And by doing that, you're representing many people that cannot come forward and speak and say what they think and say what they feel and say how they're doing right now. God knows where they are right now. But by doing this, it's kind of creating the need of healing, sending love to them wherever they are and calling back, just by our prayers, calling them back, because humans, I think Srila Prabhupada said this, the problem is not with religion, the problem is with people. And that is exactly what we see. People are using religion to gain whatever they're gaining. They start off really nicely and strongly and powerfully and with determination and love and everything. And at some point, Maya just twist them, and then they're off going something else, which is painful. Therefore, it is very important for us, like you said, now to have this conversation, open conversation, where we say, this can go wrong, and this is how we can hold you back if things go wrong. So creating that net of support for these people that want to be leaders. And also all of these experiences is teaching us how to select leaders. What are the symptoms of good leaders? All of that, the guna and karma and all of that. So it's a new learning for us. And we are in studying a pathway of transformation, knowledge, and education for people about what's next now. Because the past already passed. It is heavily putting weight on the present, and we don't want the future to go like that. So it's now where we go, turn different way. It will be great to have you again, and
I would love to have you for panel discussions. That would be amazing.
Yes, that will be awesome. And let's see where it take us on the next podcast, because we need to do healing now with with all of these devotees that went through trauma. And you're the perfect example here. I appreciate for your presence here, Prabhu.
Yeah, my honor. Yeah,
Prabhu, concluding words for the episode.
Yeah, I just hope more and more to, successfully be here as basically a personal example of, my own realizations, and I want to encourage all of us to do the same. And even however imperfect I am in doing so, or in anyone else doing so, we'll have an honest conversation, which is really the culture, which will lead to everything desirable for everybody. So let us all, really confront and be responsible for our own experience and our own role, and have these great, honest, genuine conversations where we neither sacrifice acknowledgement of the facts. We honestly come forward with our true opinions, which means we have to even confront ourselves to know what we really think about something, and be able to express our emotions, which means developing a capacity to be with them and hold them and express them, the vulnerability, right? And that wonderful nectarian fruit of knowing my true heart's desire that I have been blessed and gifted with. The one thing we have inside of us that we do not create, that springs from a causal flow of grace in our hearts. We're all asking, what am I supposed to do, and what, right? English and even Sanskrit, doesn't really speak the language of the heart of desire is being, spoken right in the center of us, directly to us by Sri Krishna, right? To do this. And by engaging in this process together, we all will come to know more and more our true desires and become more skilled at expressing those things. So my honor and my pleasure to be here in this life with you all and in this episode. Thank you for having me.
Right. Thank you, Prabhu. And just hang 10. We're going to roll the credits, and then we'll just talk briefly afterwards. We've got a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Hare Krishna. Thank you to everyone for tuning in for this episode. Those who have been watching live, thank you for your comments. Muchakunda, Rosina, my mum, Gunjan, Rupa. Who else have we got here? Sudevi Sundari and others. Tune in for the next episode, which will be tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's tomorrow?
Tomorrow is an episode about spiritual economics from Bhagavad Gita with Daneshwar Prabhu.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Isabella left a comment as well, so thanks for Isabella. Oh, one of the first ones, yeah. Okay, here we go. Rolling the new credits. Hang here in Bhima Karma Prabhu. We'll be right back.
Sure.
श्री भगवान उवाच लोकेस्मिन् द्विविधा निष्ठा पुरा प्रोक्ता मयानघ ज्ञानयोगेन सांख्यानां कर्मयोगेन योगिनां श्री भगवान उवाच लोकेस्मिन् द्विविधा निष्ठा पुरा प्रोक्ता मयानघ ज्ञानयोगेन सांख्यानां कर्मयोगेन योगिनां श्री कवकहोकिते अरिकी वकपाए ए अर्जुना को रेहारा क्वा वकमरामा अहोके की अकोए के रेराए रुअनगा मोमोतंगाताए वहाई अनाकिते मोहियोकिते वायारो कोएताही ए भय अनाकिते वकमरामा माते वकतौरिते वकारवारो कोएताही अतुमते वकपाओ कहा वकपोनो क वकहोकिते अरिकी वकपाए